When science found God. I've never much cared for religion. I mean, it's interesting and all. The old parables and philosophic insights from people 2 millenniums removed from the present. I particularly enjoyed the books of the Apocrypha and the Bible's magnum opus of Revelation, if for nothing else than the interesting stories. Even some of the tenets, like an emphasis on strong family bonds and moral stature, I can resonate with. But in terms of a giant omnipresent entity that created everything yet loves us unconditionally, watching our every move from unseen planes, yeah, I don't know about that. I still don't ascribe to a singular religious doctrine, but knowing what I know now, well, let's just say the title of atheist would be a little disingenuous. Staking my flag in that camp would contradict all the principles of which my life has been founded upon. Try as I may, I cannot in good faith deny or refute what I myself witnessed. Calling whatever we discovered God may in time prove a bit inaccurate, but there is no denying it, we found something. Science has at times become this sort of monolithic and infallible institution, one that suffers from the ostracization of fringe concepts that fail to breach the egotistic blockade. It is all too often wielded as a trump card to negate all that doesn't assimilate to the prevailing narrative. Too often outlandish claims are torn asunder because no metrics exist to properly digest them. For all the good it has brought, science is not and will not ever be an absolute. Nothing is. Absence of proof is not proof of absence, and what happened out there, in that lab deep below the streets of Stockholm, now stands as a testament in my life to all the ventures humanity has yet to embark upon. It serves as an anchor, and if ever I find myself drifting away into the blissful seas of cognitive dissonance, it is there to remind me how small and naive I truly am. I graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's in physics, and an incredible opportunity landed in my lap. One of my professors had put in a good word for me with a lab out of Stockholm. I was contacted and offered an internship, one of dozens to be extended the opportunity. I accepted the offer without a moment's hesitation. From there I uprooted my Californian lifestyle to move halfway around the world to the frigid north of Sweden. I was not prepared for the cold. Most of my summers were spent in a bikini, frolicking on the sandy beaches of Santa Monica and lounging in the sun. Sweden might as well have been another planet. Temperatures would plummet to a bone-chilling -30 in the winter. Lucky for me, though, I had a marvelous host family who helped me acclimate myself and integrate into Valhalla. I was brought onto the team and slowly began the arduous process of melding into the group. They were all incredibly kind and welcoming, but still the feeling of being woefully outclassed by my colleagues was thick as tar pitch. The project consisted of over 50 men and women, all of them among the best the world had to offer. They hailed from Germany, Japan, Poland, Hong Kong, South Korea, and many other sovereign states. It was a melting pot of some of the greatest minds I'd ever met. Seeing them in their element and marveling at the way their minds hurtled ascendant topics to delve straight to the cortex was altogether incredible, and more than a little intimidating. The express goal of the coalition was to study the behaviors of quarks, protons, and other particles in the subatomic realm to further decode the complex world of theoretic energy matrices. By extension, the group also allotted resources to develop tools for observing and decoding quantum entanglement and string theory. These principles were still in their infancy at the time, and none of us could have ever imagined the enormous magnitude of the things that were to come. The lab had its very own particle accelerator, which I myself pretty much obsessed over from day one. Most of the concrete data, however, was relayed from the lab in Geneva, home of the Large Hadron Collider. I even got to see the magnificent machine in person on a few occasions. One thing that has always staggered me is the amount of incredible achievements capable when the pursuit of knowledge guides the way. However, the complete polar opposite is also true, as curiosity without empathy all too often yields crimes against humanity. As you may already know, the Large Hadron Collider was the first machine capable of synthesizing the particle known as the Higgs boson. The machine is a particle accelerator built in a 27-kilometer loop. It uses a state of perpetual vacuum and temperature colder than that of outer space to accelerate particles to 99% the speed of light. These particles collide with one another, creating spectacular outbursts of radiation and results which are believed to be similar to that of the Big Bang on a much smaller scale. It is also through this process that the infamous Higgs boson can be synthesized. Some call it the God particle, but many physicists are not fond of the omnipotent moniker. It is in a way suitable, though, as it is ubiquitous and can spontaneously manifest or dematerialize through processes which are not yet entirely understood. It is a sort of bridge between matter and antimatter, the entity that binds the ethereal with the corporeal. It is the place between light and dark, hard to define, as once light ends, shadow begins, and vice versa. The exact moment of intersection is difficult to pinpoint, but there is a definitive moment, and that moment is the Higgs boson. It was once thought that matter could only exist in one place at a time. However, the particle slit test of our progenitors proved otherwise. A particle accelerator was used to eject electrons between one of two microscopic slits. They naturally assumed the electrons would pass through either slit A or slit B, and when directly observed, their premise was corroborated. However, when an imprint background was installed to bypass direct observation, they noticed a peculiar detail. The electrons produced what is known as a wave, or interference pattern on the imprint like ripples in a pond. This meant that the electrons were interfering with themselves while simultaneously passing through both and neither of the slits. It was at first thought to be a false negative, an outright impossibility, but thousands of repeated experiments all reached the same conclusion. There was no denying it anymore. Matter can exist in more than one place at a time, and reality is altered simply by perceiving it. The world of particle physics is a strange one, and one which we have only just begun to glimpse the majesty of. At times it may even require us to suspend our own limited human understanding of things, to contemplate things beyond our mind's comprehension. It was this idea which was the tabernacle of all the group was trying to achieve: to unravel the mysteries of the subatomic universe and better understand reality itself. The group was funded magnificently, and state-of-the-art equipment was provided from lavish donors from all around the world. My contemporaries and I began to study the processes again from square one. This consisted primarily of monitoring the nature of particles and testing the same process over and over ad nauseum. Progress was slow, and many failures were soon under our belts. But you can't build a house without chopping down a few trees. It took years to decode part of the formula. But eventually we learned that the behavior of these particles could be predicted under certain pretenses. They could also, to a certain extent, be directed, programmed to inhabit separate locations at the same time, giving them the perceived ability to exist in two places at once. In reality, though, it was more akin to a transfer of locale via microscopic slits in the Higgs boson. We realized it was not a matter of traveling to, but instead traveling through the fabric of space itself. With electrical stimuli and coordinate-based geosynchronization, one could manipulate these particles to transfer locations faster than the blink of an eye. The machine used was primitive compared to later iterations, but its true potential was not lost on us for a moment. Time went on and the technique was further refined, most readily in the distance were particles able to be transposed. It started as only a few nanometers, but eventually we could transfer particles several feet. It was through this process that blueprints for an entirely new type of machine were first devised. It was to be a machine unlike any before it. Instead of electrical stimuli sent through circuits and wires, it was transferred directly from one location to another. Wireless energy transposed through space. This greatly improved computing capabilities and allowed the machine to act and calculate much quicker than anything ever seen before. Initial ideals for the machine were skeptical at best, but as time went on, the real significance of its potential became apparent. When combined with a suitable processor and digital interface, it soon began decoding encryption and translating mathematics ciphers in a fraction of the time of anything seen before it. It didn't stop there, though. With a binary converter, it wasn't long before human physiology itself was soon able to be deciphered and converted into convenient little anagrams and simplistic formulas. This soon gave the machine the ability to replicate human tissue and organs from fetal stem cells. When given raw biomass, it could manufacture a duplicate heart or lung, one which was genetically indistinguishable from that of the donor's DNA. On one occasion, the machine even managed to regrow the arm of an amputee war veteran. Most of us thought it couldn't possibly work, that the nerve endings on the man's arms would be unable to be resuscitated after so long. But after 17 hours in surgery, when I saw the vet move his new fingers for the first time after transplant and cell resuscitation, I knew we had discovered something special. Diseases became able to be observed on a molecular level and eradicated before gestation. A virus or bacterial strain could be genetically reprogrammed to attack and destroy itself rather than the host. HPV, AIDS, the Black Death, the common cold, strep throat, gonorrhea, none of them stood a snowball's chance in hell against the unrivaled power of the machine. It could even reprogram human DNA to desired proportions, eliminating extra chromosomes and restoring neural pathways to reverse entropic cognitive illness like dementia and Parkinson's. Even pre-birth conditions like cerebral palsy and microcephaly were in the process of being all but eradicated. It wasn't just organic material either. The machine could take a block of carbon and alter its isotopes to create carbon-14 and elicit radioactivity. This proved interesting for further power possibilities as the machine demonstrated the potential for creating its own fuel source. But there was another more pertinent discovery. By changing the number of protons or neutrons in the atomic nucleus, the given element's atomic weight was altered, thereby turning it into another element altogether. The machine held the power to change the very building blocks of the universe itself. It could turn copper into gold, bromine into iodine. I think it was then that we first realized the scope of what it was that we had created. The applications for the machine seemed endless. It could write books, clone living organisms, and alter the very elements beneath our feet. It was the philosopher's stone, the holy grail, and the all-seeing eye in one convenient little package. The Deus Ex Machina. The world's very first quantum computer was born. One important distinction I would like to make. Despite the rumors, the quantum computer was not, in fact, an AI. It had computing power which was eons beyond that of a normal computer, and the ability to perform almost any task given to it, provided the necessary accommodations were implemented. For this reason, it was not allowed to make decisions for itself. Many in the group were justifiably nervous at the prospect of an artificial intelligence somehow gaining sentience and going rampant with the power of quantum manipulation. We really had no idea where our experimentation would lead us, and so the decision was made early on to prevent it from thinking on its own and going all Skynet on us. The computer was a beast of burden, happily doing any task given to it, but it was us that held the reins. That was when the bureaucratic troubles first began. A lot of donors for the project, and even a few of my fellow team members, had their own ideas on how to best utilize the machine. Every nation involved wanted it for themselves and had their own vision on how best to implement its capabilities. Several members of the coalition ended up leaving the project or being outright dismissed, promising to return with a battalion of lawyers at their back. One man was even caught attempting to smuggle data from the lab and detained to await prosecution. The reigning project overseer was also relieved of duty. In his place, Dr. Henrik Lundgren assumed the role of Director of Operations. Dr. Lundgren is a dear friend and a brilliant mind. That's what makes his fate lie so heavily on my heart. It's a tragedy what befell him, but I won't act as though he wasn't responsible for stoking the flames. Lundgren managed to settle the group down and unite a divided faction of researchers who all held their own agendas. He made the executive decision to keep the computer in the hands of the international team and continue to study it for continued data analysis and eventual replication. All those who didn't abide were dismissed or removed physically as the need arose. Lundgren had toiled for years on the development of the machine's virtual capabilities and decided it best to invest more heavily into it. It took months of development, but soon a fully functional Sims-esque program was up and running. The simulation was modeled to be an exact carbon copy of our own world and held all the coordinating pieces within it. All the people, animals, and nations. Augmented control apparatuses were then developed to allow us the ability to view the computer's creation firsthand. The simulation it created was so visceral that none could even perceive that they were in a simulation at all. Test subjects were exposed to their own loved ones within the program and could not distinguish them from their real-life counterparts. I even took it for a spin a few times. I was hooked up to the monitor via a neural cortex interface and had my mind rendered into the simulation. I awoke to the sights of sunlight peeking through my blinds and the sounds of cars outside. Around me on the walls were posters of Harry Potter, JoJo, and the X-Files, among countless others. I recognized immediately where I was. It was my childhood home, an apartment complex in Sacramento. The simulation was so detailed that even my old Raggedy Ann doll with the missing eye was there. My parents were both there and acted in accordance to how they would behave in real life. My dad even made new corny jokes in a fashion that suited his personality. It wasn't a memory though, it was an entirely new scenario, concocted by my mind and the quantum simulation. My parents are both deceased in real life, and getting to spend time with them again was indescribable. Even if they were just simulations, the experience was profoundly cathartic for me. I ended up leaving the simulation in tears, overwhelmed by the experience and the ability to speak with my parents once again. It even made dealing with their absence a little easier in the real world. After all, I could now speak to them anytime I wanted. I found myself never wanting to leave the Matrix. Dr. Lundgren subsequently questioned me about my experience, and I was all too happy to relay the things I had seen. He listened intently with simple occasional nods and one-word responses. His gray face wore a smile and cheeks dimpled in delight, but his eyes were far from the present and worried. We held a meeting with all staff members sometime after. Lundgren stood and paced in front of the group, silent and mind-swirling in thought. When he did finally speak, he held our undivided attention. He walked through all that our little group had managed to accomplish, and all the things we had learned on our journey, all the miracles unraveled and translated into digital coding, and all the advancements made. It was not a triumphant voice, however. It was somber, as if none of it truly mattered. He then first proposed his new theory. Here we were with an entire simulated universe at the tips of our fingers, a digital reality created and maintained by a machine we had built, a simulation which was so authentic that none could tell it apart from reality itself. And if we had the power to create that, how did we know that our own universe was not the result of the same process? How did we know our reality was not, in fact, a simulation? An unnerving silence befell the rest of the group as Lundgren concluded his epiphany. All in attendance seemed to silently contemplate the idea, with a noticeably nervous aura now lingering. There wasn't much said after that, but there didn't need to be. We had an entirely new goal. Upon returning for work the following day, I immediately noticed that several of our colleagues had abandoned the project without so much as a goodbye. Only 7 of us remained, among which was the prestigious Henrik Lundgren. He was changed though. His upbeat optimism and inquisitive attitude reverted to an impatient, gibbering wreck of a man. He became hostile to prolonged questioning, and I could see the idea gnaw on his mind as he walked the tightrope between madness and genius. At times he even appeared on the verge of psychosis. He would ramble and talk to himself, and pretty much stopped leaving the laboratory altogether. We set our sights on a new task to dismantle and test the hypothesis of Lundgren, to develop an ability to break through the boundaries of our suspected simulation and peer beyond our own reality to glimpse whatever may lie on the other side. Nothing else seemed to matter anymore by that point. Life may be accidental, consciousness too. Hell, even complex organisms like human beings, the result of genetic evolution and a bit of luck. However, simulation is not accidental. It requires an immense amount of dedication, programming, and logistics, not to mention power and maintenance. The ability to synthesize digital worlds is not something learned or accomplished by accident. It takes time, resources, and brainpower to even attempt it. And even then, it's no guarantee. The one concept that was off the table immediately was that the theorized simulation was the result of natural phenomenon or random cosmic alignment. If Lundgren's hypothesis was correct, and our universe was indeed a simulation, then someone or something had to be pulling the strings behind the veil. Powerful as the quantum computer was, even it did not have the ability to glimpse directly into higher dimensions. As stated before, it took commands only from us and could only perform tasks which we could coherently articulate to it. We realized rather early that directly viewing outside the boundaries of the universe was likely not possible. The only option was to send a message. Through remedial experimentation and dozens of ponderous sleepless nights, we finally had a breakthrough. Our reality is based on laws. Laws of motion, laws of attraction, laws of physics. These laws cannot be broken accidentally. But with quantum technology, they can be manipulated. Many believe that intelligent extraterrestrials were first alerted to humanity when the atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Ours was essentially the same idea, demonstrating that we had the capability to toil with the quantum world in hopes of eliciting a response from a higher being. If we could break or bend one of these laws of reality, Then perhaps the orchestrator would be compelled to respond. One of the earlier discoveries we had made was that of the concept of reverse time. Time is a measurement of something that occurs, and without anything to observe, time is meaningless. The concept only makes sense when in the presence of matter. The two concepts of space and time are coterminous, like light and dark or hot and cold. One does not exist without the other. Where there is space, there is time. And where there is time, there must be space. The opposite of matter is not nothing, but antimatter. A true nothingness or void of anything substantial does not exist. It cannot exist based upon the nature of existence itself. Antimatter is the invisible material which operates unseen and fills all the gaps which matter does not. All of it held together by the Higgs boson. If an opposite of matter exists, then an opposite of time must as well. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and all reactions must remain proportional to force exerted. By utilizing the quantum computer, we had the ability to send protons back in time, sort of. We could make them exist where they once had not by using dark energy matrices and particle superpositioning to put them in two places at once. The discovery had actually been made sometime earlier, but never officially tested. It was restricted and marked as unapproachable, as many of our patrons were rightfully concerned by the prospect of unintentionally altering the past. Doing so could create a butterfly effect and wreak havoc upon the present. We were told vehemently that the reverse time experimentation was forbidden, but now we had a legitimate reason to take an interest. It took some convincing on our end, but eventually we were successful when we promised to unveil the greatest discovery yet. The parameters were set within the computer and the lab was prepped for the operation. A single seed of Dianthus caryophyllus was placed in a transparent reinforced container in the center of the room. The specimen was placed on damp resin paper, and several little green tendrils had sprouted from its shell. The idea was to reverse the symbiotic metabolism of the test subject and cause it to rapidly revert to a zygote state. The seed would be directed to perform its life cycle backwards, thereby contradicting the natural forward flow of life and time. The parameters were finished, and Lundgren stood by the machine. He glanced to each of us individually with a sullen demeanor and nervous twinkle in his eye. He looked to me last, and I nodded. Lundgren took a deep breath, adjusted his glasses, and flipped the switch. Immediately the tendrils within the seed began to retract. They disappeared within the shell soon after, and the seed shrunk until the point in which it was no longer visible. The computer alerted us that the task had been completed, and silence descended upon the crew. We stayed that way for several seconds until a commotion from the computer drew our attention. An array of flickering lights and sirens began to wail like banshees, indicating an error of some sort. Suddenly, the seed reappeared and began to grow at an impossible rate. A mass of wriggling green tendrils erupted from the shell and pressed firmly against the case within seconds. It swelled within, and the chamber violently ruptured a moment later, sending shards of glass catapulting throughout the room. I managed to duck away just in time, but others in the group were not so lucky. One man, Reginald Diabeck, was struck with a shard in the neck. The piece cut a gash across his throat, causing a thick crimson to spill forth from his gullet. He collapsed to the ground as others began to rush to his aid. Before we could reach him, the engorged serpentine appendages of the seed ensnared him, slithering around his neck and abdomen. Diabeck gurgled and terror filled his eyes as the green pythonic roots began to constrict him. I watched at a loss for words as Diabeck's wound sealed. His gray hair turned to a dark brown. The wrinkles on his forehead and bags below his eyes dissolved into his skin in a matter of seconds. The blackheads and liver spots on his cheeks soon followed suit. All of us watched stupefied as the process continued onward and Diabeck appeared to age backwards. Diabeck had to have been nearly 60 years old, but in a matter of moments he appeared as though he was a young man in his early 30s. He then went young adult, then juvenile, then teenager. Diabeck screamed in terror as his voice cracked from a gruff, raspy tone to a high-pitched prepubescent shriek. His body shrunk in his clothes and his extremities retracted within his coat. By the time we had reached him, he was gone. We didn't have time to gawk, as our stupor was interrupted by the computer blaring a warning siren, and a flickering plethora of lights designated an external problem of some sort. The display was a failsafe designed to protect the computer from malicious outside sources. Most of us thought the firewalls of the quantum computer were enough to prevent any attempted breach. But apparently we were wrong. One of my colleagues scrambled to the kill switch. He was poised to throw it, when he was halted by a sudden shout from Lundgren. Lundgren stood, eyes wide as dinner plates and mouth agape as he stared at the main monitor of the computer. The warning display had ceased, and only a single screen remained active. Upon it was displayed a single loading bar, with approximately 20% of it being filled in. This indicated only one thing: something was being downloaded. We immediately surmised that it must be a virus or other malware of some sort, a prospect once thought impossible based on the security measures of the computer. And yet the download persevered. All attempts made to restrict the download and halt its progress proved futile. We exchanged nervous glances with one another, torn on whether to pull the plug and save our creation from hostile insurgents, or allow it to continue to whatever ends. The call was eventually made by the investors outside the room, who had since been notified of the development. They demanded power be cut, and the machine be saved. The computer represented a colossal investment, and the cost to repair or replace it, if any damage were to ensue, was not something taken lightly. Begrudgingly, Lundgren followed orders and commanded shutdown protocol. It was done straight away, but the machine did not power down. It continued impossibly and without a direct power source sustaining it. Panic began to erupt from the lab, and power to the entire facility was ordered to be cut from the mainframe. It was done within seconds, and the room fell into darkness. The only light that remained was that of the main monitor as the download reached the halfway mark. The computer groaned and whirred under enormous duress as hundreds of fans shot to life to attempt to cool the Leviathan machine. We stood back, unable to make heads or tails of the development. There was simply no possible way the machine should have remained active, and yet it was. It continued to fill up the progress bar, powered by the fuel of some unknown outside source. With no other viable solutions at hand barring physical destruction of the computer itself, we could do nothing but await the culmination. The download finished several minutes later, and the room fell into pitch black. We deliberated for a moment before deciding our only recourse was to power up the computer once again. The mysterious file weighed in at an impressive 100,000 terabytes, enough to fill hundreds of normal hard drives, but just another drop in the ocean for the quantum computer. Once full mobility was achieved, a single never-before-seen prompt filled the screen. Unknown file type. Do you wish to execute the file? All attempts made to bypass the prompt failed. We quickly used a separate program on another screen to trace the file's origin, but to no avail. Now, there is no hiding from a quantum computer behind a proxy or VPN. It uses an algorithm-based process combined with a ping response speed to determine probable origin, up to an accuracy of 99.99%. We're talking response time measured in millionths of a second. But for a quantum computer, it's like the ABCs. Sure, it gets it wrong once in every million attempts, the point being it always has a guess. This time, however, we received a new message. Unable to determine file origin. Lundgren took a step back and pondered the situation and wiped the beads of glistening sweat from his brow. With nothing else at our disposal, he realized there was only one option left, and so he gave one last command. Open it. The computer began to render the file, the process taking several minutes to complete. It was entirely in binary code, and eventually translated to a single message. Upon completion, 2 words in a white font sat silently amidst a black background. I never thought 2 simple words could have such lasting effects on my psyche. Those 2 words that have made me question everything I thought I ever knew. The computer fizzled out moments later and shut down. All of us just kind of left after that. I returned home, overwhelmed by the events and left with a mystic sense of terror instilled deep in my stomach. The following morning, I was called by one of the investors. He informed me that someone had broken into the lab late the previous night and sabotaged the operation. The lab was lit ablaze and soon reduced to a smoldering pile of ash, and the quantum computer was damaged beyond repair. Whoever had done it possessed a security card and seemed to know the exact process required to dismantle the automatic sprinkler system. Police held a single suspect in custody, a man who appeared as a neurotic mess in the center of a maniacal nervous breakdown. He was tried and convicted sometime later, and declared clinically insane. He was ordained to a mental health facility in northern Sweden, and it is there that he remains to this day. That man's name? Henrik Lundgren. I've never been able to properly assess just what it was that happened that day. The event has left me shaken and confused in more ways than I could possibly list. I don't suppose I'll ever be whole again, I just can't be. I know the truth, the reason for our meager existence. We had reached out far beyond, and something answered our call. Whether or not it was truly what we would call God, I can't say. But I will say, after what I saw happen to Diabeck and what became of Lundgren, I can't think of a better word for it. I think God is something we never could have imagined. It holds us all within the palm of its hand, and with a simple flick of the wrist, we would cease to be. There is no love, there is no salvation. There is only that which lies beyond the margins of reality, that which we have no possible hope of understanding. One thing is also certain, it is watching us, and it does not want us meddling in that which we have no business seeing. We are set amidst an ocean of infinite black seas, and it was not meant for us to travel far. That final message could not have been clearer, and any time I find myself drifting, I remember those two simple words relayed by the quantum computer in its last moments of life. Turn back. The Horrors of the Backrooms, Part 2. It's been about 3 months since my whole incident with the Expanse. I had been seeing my new therapist, Tiffany, for pretty much that entire length of time. She was on the younger side and had only really been working in the field for a few years. But she seemed to know what she was doing and actually listened to me. I told her a lot of stuff and experiences in my life up to that point, but I mostly veered away from the topic of the Expanse. Wasn't trying to get myself committed. I don't really know how that whole thing works. Just feels like the more I went into it, the better the chance I would have of her thinking I was legitimately insane. Hyperbole aside, though, I just thought it would be better for the both of us if I didn't bring it up much. That is, until one day she insisted that I talk about it. She wasn't authoritative necessarily, but said everything she could to guarantee I would feel okay with going into detail about it. After all, me trying to tell others about it is why I was here in the first place. Alex, you can trust me. I'm here to help you, not judge you. If I was, then I wouldn't be in this chair, she said softly, leaning forward in her chair and looking at me with almost maternal instinct. I won't force you to talk about anything, but I promise you don't have to feel like a prisoner in your own mind. I'll bet I can relate a lot more than you might think. I perked up upon hearing that last sentence, my eyes shifting in her direction with a look of intrigue and curiosity. She returned the eye contact before delivering a slight smirk, confirming her implication. You're not serious, I accused. Listen, I get you want to help me, but you don't have to lie to do it. This isn't necessarily the most professional of me, and I really shouldn't say this, but that place you're talking about, it's not as insane as you might think. I believe your story, every word of it. She continues, suddenly stopping her hand gestures as she waits for my response. I really don't appreciate you making a joke out of my experience, I snarled. You're supposed to be helping me. You're supposed to be different than all the other people who won't listen and ridicule me. I'm nothing but a punchline to everyone, even before any of this happened. After my little fit, I then got up out of my chair and began to walk to the door, only to be stopped when she announced something that made my heartbeat nearly cease upon hearing it. The thing with all the legs, came her calm assertion. I turned, looking over to her with wide eyes and mouth slightly ajar. I had never told her about the creature, not once. In fact, I hadn't told anyone about it, let alone any of its anatomical features. So I stood there, looking like a complete moron while she got out of her chair and approached me. Taking a quick glance to her left at a long curtain on the side of the room with no windows and then directly back at me. It tried to kill you, didn't it? She inquired rhetorically. It tried to kill me too. Still, I stood there stunned, not even knowing how to form words for a response. Alex, you gotta believe me. I'm sorry if you thought I was trying to discredit you. That wasn't my intention. But I know what you're talking about. And I know you're not the only person who's gone through this. Now, Will you please sit and finish our session? I don't want you leaving this room upset. She kept her gaze locked hard on me, and I took a deep breath, internally kicking myself for not keeping my cool when I had always been a person who prided myself on doing just that. So with a bit of hesitance, I turned and headed back over to my chair, sitting back down and cupping my hands together as I waited for her to continue speaking. How did you get in? Like, how did you get there? She asks, a sympathetic undertone present in her voice. It took me nearly a full minute to answer despite knowing precisely what I wanted to say. But Tiffany's body language gave me no doubts that she was entirely prepared to listen. A wall, I croaked out. This wall in my basement, it was like it wasn't even there. Like things could just go through it. It was so weird. I've only seen things like that in video games. This didn't seem to shock her, not in the slightest. Instead, she only nodded slightly while staying silent, allowing me to elaborate. My parents wouldn't listen to me. I tried telling them about it, but they never wanted to hear it. All I know is that I wanted some proof, so I could show someone who would do something about it, or at least someone who would believe me. How did you feel while you were in there? She asked, prompting me to take another several seconds of silence as I thought of my reply. I really don't know to explain it. It's not a feeling you can describe. I don't think anyone's felt it. Besides you, is there any chance you could tell me about what you saw in the walls? I solicit, only to prompt a look of hesitance from Tiffany. This is about you, Alex, not me. I'm here to hear your story, not to tell you mine. She rebuts, cupping her hands together. I know you are, but I want to hear yours. Maybe, just maybe it'll help me be able to find some closure with mine. I fire back, more insistent than previously. I just want to know there's someone else out there who understands. Tiffany exhales, looking to both her right and her left, only to return her gaze back over to me as silence swallows the room. I knew that in the back of her mind she did want to tell me that despite her training and education, she was still human at the end of the day. Screw protocols, screw procedures, screw all of it. Just please tell me. I beg. Leaning forward in anticipation, Tiffany keeps eye contact with me. Still appearing unsure about her next move, I widen my eyes and let her know just how desperate I was to hear about her experience. Okay, she sighs, still hesitant. I was 10, it was my birthday, and my mom had invited several of my friends over to the house to celebrate. My dad had taken me out to the shed in our backyard so he could grab tools to finish working on my birthday present. He refused to tell me what it was until it was finished. You see, my dad never really let me into the shed very much, not unless I was close to him. Said he didn't want me messing with grown-up stuff in there, stuff that could hurt me. She paused, allowing me to interject with a question. What was your dad's job? I inquire, surprisingly prompting her to smile. He was a carpenter. He was always very good with his hands. Tiffany trails off, an expression of guilt creeping onto her face. Alex, are you sure you want me to do this? It just doesn't feel right. Yes, I need this. Okay. Well, we went into the shed, and it was a very small shed. Could barely fit 3 people inside there at once. And yet, there was a door on the opposite end of the entrance door. It looked like it would lead you somewhere in the back of the shed, but there wasn't any more physical structure behind it to give the door a real purpose for being there. It was about as pointless as a window on the floor. Dad grabbed some of his tools, and I just kept staring right at that door the whole time. I had seen it a couple of times before, but on this particular occasion, I just really wanted to know why it was there. So I asked him. He told me he was going to add on to the shed, and that he wanted to have the door built ahead of time. Of course, me being 10 with not much comprehension of how carpentry works, I took that answer at face value. Yet there was also this part of me that felt like he wasn't telling the whole truth. After the party was over that night and I had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. I laid awake all night thinking about that door. I don't know why. Even at the time, I knew it was an odd thing to focus on. Nonetheless, it didn't leave my mind. I tossed and turned. I had a long day with a lot going on, and yet I was still wide awake. And it was all because of that damn door. There were another few brief moments of silence as Tiffany turned to look at that curtain on the side of the room again, causing me to do the same as she started speaking once again. At one point, it got to be too much. I was just way too curious about something so mundane. Like I said, I don't know why, but I got out of bed, grabbed my flashlight, and made my way out to the shed. I made sure to not wake Dad up, not even sure how long I would have gotten grounded for if I ended up getting caught. I make it to the shed regardless and walk over to the door, and with the only other sound in the immediate area being crickets, I was able to hear something on the other side of it, which logically should have just been more crickets. But it wasn't. Instead, it sounded like electric buzzing, if that even makes any sense. Like the buzzing of ceiling lights. Even at that age, I knew that something wasn't right. I recognized the sound from the lights in my school at the time, and I knew there was no reason for me to be hearing it coming from there. I let my curiosity get the best of me, as a lot of kids do. So I opened that damn door, God. I just want to kick myself for even saying it now. But I opened the door and there it was, the expanse. I remember it just like how you described it. Ugly yellow walls, a damp and old-looking carpet, and the buzzing, oh, the buzzing. It was twice as loud now that I had opened the door. I didn't know what to think. I knew that I was scared. Part of me was anyway. But I was mainly in shock. This wasn't possible. I had only seen things like this happening in the cartoons and movies I watched. I told myself I wouldn't go far, that I would only take a few steps inside just to see what the place was, and to make sure it wasn't just my imagination, that I wasn't just dreaming. At first, I honored what I told myself. I only took 3 steps inside before staring at the empty hallway in front of me. The fluorescent lights flickering above only helped to unease me, but my curiosity was overpowering my gut feeling, the feeling that something was wrong, and not just with what I could see. I finally began listening to my instincts at that point, because it wasn't long before I decided it was really time to go, and that I had already overstayed my welcome. When I turned around to go back the way I came, I saw nothing. Just a flat, ugly yellow wall like the rest of them. Any sign of the door being there just up and vanished. I went up to the wall, pushed on it with all my weight, threw myself against it over and over, thinking I'd get some sort of different outcome. But no, I was just a scared little girl trapped in a place I knew nothing about. I banged on the wall and yelled as loud as I could for my parents. Wasn't long before I started to cry in a desperate panic. All I did was stand there, continuously throwing my fists on the wall over and over and begging for my parents to come save me from this place. And it wasn't long before something heard me, something that knew I was invading its territory. I heard it screech when it was coming for me. It was awful. Don't think I've ever heard anything more horrific than the sounds that thing made. It was like someone had put a screaming baby on a distorted megaphone. So I did the only thing I could do at the time. I ran as fast as I could to the right because the screeching was coming from the left. It felt like, I don't know, like I wasn't even moving. I just passed yellow wall after yellow wall. I knew in the back of my mind I was going somewhere, but the rest of me felt deceived. It looked endless and maddening. Eventually, I came to a stop, feeling like I had put enough distance between myself and whatever it was that had been pursuing me. What I felt wasn't just fear. This wasn't looking down a dark flight of stairs or a creepy basement or seeing a spider in your room. No, This was existential on a level I can't put into concrete wording. I still hadn't seen the thing. Not up to that point. So I went and hid behind a wall. Placed my back against it so softly I couldn't even tell if I had actually made contact with it. It was around 10 seconds when I was able to work up the courage to peek my head over the edge of the wall. I was shaking, holding in sniffles, had silent tears going down my face. I didn't dare make a sound. I couldn't afford to. At first, there was nothing. It kind of looked like something out of one of those old playhouses from the 2000s. Just cold, empty, no life present at all. It was uncanny. Tiffany pauses, inhaling and shifting her gaze over towards that curtain once more, prompting me to finally point it out. "What's going on with that?" I asked as politely as I could. "Oh, nothing important. Just more wall." She laughed off dismissively. For the first time since she started her story, I felt a bit uncomfortable. But I mainly chalked it up to her being invested in what she was saying. So I went back to just listening. There I was, staring down that yellow void until I hear it screech again as it rounds the corner all the way down the hall and spots me peeking. I knew it saw me because we both froze for a second. It's like it wanted me to know that it knew I was there and that my fate was sealed. All those legs. God, those legs. They all moved in this grotesquely perfect unison as it started running towards me. So I turned and bolted, hugging the wall to my left, which was a dead end. Just my luck. Did I mention I don't like spiders? Or really, anything with more than 4 legs for that matter. So it wasn't exactly on my bucket list to encounter a man-sized mutated centipede. Didn't think my little legs could carry me so far and so fast. Everything around me was a blur, like I was on a high-speed rail train or something. But it still wasn't enough. That thing was hot on my tail, and there was a small part of me that knew I couldn't outrun it. I pulled away from the wall to my left, took some turns to try and confuse it. But it knew what I was doing. Probably because everyone who ran from it before tried the same thing and failed. God have mercy on them. I knew it was closing in on me when its footsteps got louder. Death was practically knocking at my door. I still remember how it sounded when it ran. Makes my skin crawl to this day. The yellow walls, the hum buzz of the lights, the old, moist carpet. It made it that much worse, knowing I was probably going to die young in such an alien environment. I wasn't getting out, not alive anyway, or so I thought. She trailed off. "You said the wall in your basement was how you entered it, right? The expanse?" She inquiries, catching me off guard with the sudden question. "Yes." I trail off, unsure of what to say next. "Why didn't you try to show anyone?" "My parents, they built a wall of wood panels in front of it, told me they were tired of my ghost stories and my obsession with that damn wall, so they said they'd get it out of my sight and out of my mind. I think they know there's something wrong with it. Kinda like how your dad did. But they don't want me messing with things I don't understand. Or they just didn't want our house to become a government research site. Both seem just as likely. I wish they would at least acknowledge my story as true. Their own son went to this horrific place, survived being attacked by a dangerous monster, and they just pretend like I'm crazy, that I'm just desperate for attention. I hate it, and I almost hate them for it. But they've raised me, fed me, and given me shelter. Maybe one day they'll come to their senses. Tiffany's stare became a bit more cold, as if I had just told her what I ate for breakfast that morning. I hadn't seen her ever look at me like that before now. I didn't like it. It was unsettling, especially considering the gravity and context of what I had just said. "Why don't you finish telling me about your experience? We're kind of getting off topic, don't you think?" I interject, hoping that she would agree. "Right," she began, bringing me a bit of relief. It's about as straightforward as a situation like that could be. I was running from something that I truly couldn't escape in a place I was never meant to be. Eventually, after going for so long, my lungs began to give out. I simply couldn't muster the strength or energy to run anymore, even though I knew I had no choice. And I think that was the worst part of it all, knowing that I couldn't even do the bare minimum of running away to save myself. Sure as hell wasn't going to try and fight that thing. Soon enough, I came to a dead end, boxed in by walls on either side of me and the creature behind me. I somehow mustered the courage to turn around as it closed in. I could have sworn it had even tried to smile at me before it prepared to kill me, like it knew what it was doing was going to make me suffer, and that it was going to take pleasure in the agony of my slow, painful death. But something in me snapped, and I honestly shocked myself when this sudden shouting roar emerged from within me, and I directed it right at the creature. I thought it would be completely pointless, but to my surprise, it hesitated, like it was caught off guard by a violent outburst of what it saw as prey. "Leave me alone! Leave me alone, you stupid, ugly monster!" I shouted while flailing my arms. I noticed that it had been taken aback and I wanted to keep it that way. "You're a stupid, weird, and ugly monster," I continued screaming, baring my teeth to make myself look less docile. It wasn't long before the beast had realized who was really in control, so it began crawling forward again, despite me throwing my various insults at it. I was desperate, saying every nasty thing I could think of as it closed the distance. But like I said, my dominance was short-lived. I wasn't in control any longer, so I tried something else. I proposed a deal. To it. Tiffany then pauses, not even making a sound as she looked at the floor with mannerisms that almost resembled guilt. "What? What did you offer it?" I grilled demandingly. "That's not important, but what is? Is that it spoke to me, told me it was hungry, in this gross, hoarse, and nightmarish voice, like an elderly smoker who had his throat filled with a thick syrup. I didn't even know something that alien could even possess the ability to speak in the first place. Its voice really contrasts with all those horrible screeches it makes, I'll tell you that. But I eventually made it out, found a wall that was darker than the rest, and fell right through. Ended up right back up in... Whoa, wait. What did you offer it?" I said, less patience present in my tone. "And don't say it's not important. I want to know why it let you live." But Tiffany doesn't respond out loud. Instead, she goes looking at that freaking curtain again, giving it an intriguing stare before standing up out of her chair and moving towards it. That's when I decided it was time to leave. "I think this session is over," I pronounced as firmly as I could at the time, only for her entire demeanor to shift once the words left my mouth. I stood up, attempting to go over and grab my cell phone from her table. "Sit," she snarled, giving me a look that said she was not in any mood to argue. "Tell me what you offered it," I erupted, my voice echoing off the walls. She didn't respond yet again, prompting me to lunge for the door. I got my hand on the knob and fumbled turning it, so I threw it on there again, only to be stopped mid-turn by the sound of a click coming from behind me. I already concluded the obvious. "Stop. Turn around slowly. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be," she growled, presumably waving the gun she had pointed at the back of my skull. "You know, I'd rather die than get sent back there," I rebut. "Oh, it won't be that simple. I'll just put a bullet in each of your knees and then throw you in there. So your fate is up to you. Do you want to die slow and painfully, or have a chance of running away for a while?" I put my hands up and slowly turn around, and right there is the sight of Tiffany standing next to the curtain with a Glock in her right hand pointed directly at me. "Good," she muttered, just before reaching with her free hand to grab the edge of the curtain and yank it to the side. And behind said curtain was a door. Just a simple, dark red door, like one you'd see in someone's home, That alone isn't usually very sinister. But in this context, it was beyond bone-chilling. I knew what was on the other side of it, and that I didn't have much longer before I ended up there, back in the expanse. "Come here," Tiffany demanded, using her gun to point to the door. With no choice, I did as I was told, marching over to her and stopping just a meter in front of the door, my hands still in the air. "It's hungry. I'm sorry, Alex, but it's hungry," she said, all the sympathy exiting her tone. "When I saw your story, I knew that I needed to find you. So you can kill me to continue to save your own skin. How do you know the creature could even make it out of the expanse? What do you have to fear? It's nothing but an empty threat when you're out here." "Oh, it can," she stuttered. "You see, you got lucky. You fell into a public place where it didn't want to reveal itself by continuing to pursue you. But most people, even those who fall back into reality, aren't so lucky. How would it even know where you are when you're not in the expanse? You don't have to bend to this thing's will. I promise you." But instead of rebutting, she simply waves the gun toward the door, signaling for me to open it and step through. I can't take the risk. I need to look out for myself. People were never meant to discover the expanse, and we're both paying the price for treading somewhere we don't belong. Plus, if I don't hold up my end of the bargain, I'm not the only one in danger. Far from it. This goes beyond just me and you. "Seems like you're getting a bit of slack compared to me," I barked back. "Hurry up and stop stalling," Tiffany snapped. "There's no need to do this. There's got to be another way. I bet you haven't even tried to use that gun on it once. Have you?" "I said go, Alex," she commanded violently, now moving closer and placing the barrel inches away from my skull. I turned slowly, giving her one last look, a look that told her that I was desperate for her to come to her senses. All I wanted was for her to realize the madness of what she was doing, and that there was a way out. But alas, I was hoping for an outcome that was impossible at that point. So I took a deep breath, looked ahead, and lifted my hand up, guiding it over to the doorknob. "You're gonna get what's coming to you," I said, maintaining my forward gaze despite my defeated tone. I then slowly pulled back, the door creaking as it inched across the distance of the floor. My eyes widened as I saw it, the place I thought I'd never see again. All my fight-or-flight instincts went into high alert as soon as I heard the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. Everything that happened came right back to me, in a way that made me feel like I never truly left the expanse. It was like getting a greeting from my own personal hell, welcoming me back home. I took my first couple steps forward, the all-too-familiar but subtle squelch of the moist carpet manifesting as my foot made contact. I felt goosebumps form around my arms and legs. The expanse was a bit cooler than what I had previously remembered. "It's for the greater good," came Tiffany from behind. I don't turn around, not at first. But once I hear a heavy slam, I take a look back, seeing nothing but more of the ugly yellow wallpaper. It was just like Tiffany's experience if she was even telling the truth. The door that leads in does not lead out. But just like that, I was right back in the place I dreaded most. But I wouldn't make the same mistakes I did last time. The first thing I wanted to do was begin searching for a wall that I could fall through in order to get out of here. I also wanted to pinpoint wherever the creature might have been, that way I could take steps to avoid it. I needed to keep quiet, to not panic like I did the first time around, and if I was careful enough, I knew I just might survive long enough to make it out once more. I then started walking in a crouched formation, turning right and heading down a corridor that led to a dead end, only to turn and take another left once reaching the end, and immediately feeling off-put by the sight I had laid eyes upon. At the end of the hall was what looked to be a four-way intersection of rooms, which by itself was nothing new. I had seen things like the first time I was here. However, there was a strange, bright light being emitted from something in the opening of the hallway on the right. I kept quiet and glanced around me, looking for any signs of the creature's presence as I considered moving to investigate whatever was causing the disproportionate light effect. And in that moment, I discovered nothing. However, I did hear something that completely threw me off. First, it was a sudden slam, as if a heavy door had been opened and closed in quick succession. Then, that same slam was followed by the sound of footsteps and human voices, both male and female. I turn back and hug the wall to my right for cover and get down as low as I can, getting all the way up to where it ended, and laying on my stomach while peeking over to see whoever these people were. Just in front of the now invisible door were 3 individuals, all of which looked like they just walked straight out of an episode of some shadowy government conspiracy TV show. There were 2 women and 1 man, the 3 of which were dressed near head to toe in black, with all sorts of body armor and gear to go with it. Each of them held a rifle in their hands with a pistol on their utility belts, along with various other non-firearm weapons like grenades and knives. The man then puts a hand near his left ear, fidgeting with what appeared to be some sort of earpiece for communication, becoming visibly frustrated as he struggled to get it to function properly. Believe me, I wanted nothing more than to run up to them and tell them everything. Tell them to help me find a way out of this godforsaken place and show them the horrors these walls hold, and who was responsible for putting me in here. But I don't think they were there to help, considering the fact that one of them had Tiffany's Glock strapped to their side, with a bit of blood sitting on the side of the barrel. She was nowhere to be found, and I pondered as to whether or not she was dead or incapacitated, but it wasn't long before I got my answer. The body's getting picked up and taken to Site 7. Their director of operations said so, came the man, his voice soft but low in pitch. Why not take it back to Site 12? Then they can feed her to that blue freak they got locked up in there. Rebuts one of the women in a sarcastic tone. He's got a talent for killing, I'll give him that. The other woman chimes in. But man, West wasn't kind to him in the looks department. I bet you've never even seen him fight, the man jokes, smirking as he clutches his rifle. One of the women opens her mouth to form a reply, only to be suddenly cut off by a blood-curdling, ear-shattering screech coming from somewhere to the far left of us. The 3 of them all immediately snapped to attention and raised their weapons, ready for a fight. The creature, it knew we were here, and it was coming. The man quickly lifts a hand to his ear again, resting 2 fingers against it before saying, "This is Agent Creed with Team X5-2. We're at the location and the witness has been terminated and pinged for pickup and disposal. May or may not be cryptid activity present as well. Should we keep moving?" The 3 agents all stood at attention as they received their response, one that I myself was too far to hear coming from the communication piece. I arrived at the conclusion that it was now my time to leave, so I got to my feet as quietly as possible, still hugging the wall as I slowly backed away. I turned and refocused my attention to the corridor, peering down at the intersection and setting my sights on the bright opening to the right. I kept myself in a crouched position as I hastily made my way towards it, the horrid screech of the creature once again echoing through the walls of the expanse. "Down here!" one of the 2 women shouted, immediately making my heart sink as I had hoped and prayed they weren't referring to the hall that I was currently occupying. But of course, my hopes and wants meant nothing here. I immediately picked up speed, which was nothing in comparison to how quickly I began moving after hearing one of those female agents shout in my direction from the end of the hall behind me. "Hey, get back here!" I of course had no intentions to obey her demand. Instead, I broke into a full-on sprint, not taking even a moment to waste on trying to convince them of my situation. I made a mad dash for the intersection as the woman began to open fire. Several bullets whipped by and missed me by mere inches, only causing my adrenaline to skyrocket, making me pump my legs like never before. After what felt like an eternity, I finally made it to the end, and made a sudden and hard right turn. The woman had stopped firing at me, but cried out in a fury of both horror and rage. Gunfire then erupted through the walls as I heard the creature's dozens of footsteps as it closed in on the three agents. "What is that?" the man shouted, just before letting out an agonizing cry. I didn't dare look back, but all I know is that things likely didn't go his way in the midst of encountering the beast up close. Their screams were haunting, and that coupled with the gunfire and the screeching of the creature made the situation all the more horrible. The sounds of flesh tearing didn't help, but at this point, I couldn't tell who was killing who. It was only when I was more than a couple 100 feet away and my heartbeat slowed to a more reasonable speed had I realized that my surroundings changed significantly. Instead of the soft thumping and squelching of moist carpet, my feet were hitting solid and dry tile. I slowed myself and looked down, only to now see a bright white-tiled floor. It was pretty much what you'd find in your average public school building. And speaking of, when I glanced ahead of me, the hallway was no longer yellow. Instead, the walls to my immediate left and right consisted of tall blue lockers. Above those was a simple white painted slant of wall that ran up into an equally boring and flat tiled ceiling. There was a gap in the lockers on the left wall around 30 feet in front of me, so I went towards it, only to discover that said gap was actually a door. You'd think by now I'd have had my fill on anything to do with those. The door itself was made from a light, polished wood, with a tall, vertically thin window running up the middle. I peered into the glass, laying eyes upon a classroom, one that looked to be abandoned. Had I made it out? Had I escaped the expanse a second time by some sheer dumb luck? Number. Because I looked back behind me and saw the way the yellow walls slowly faded into this new structure. The cutoff was sudden and easy to distinguish, dozens of feet of yellow wallpaper suddenly becoming a solid white and stopping right where the blue lockers began. It was obvious that this was a school, or at least an imitation of one, but I wasn't back in reality. I was still in the expanse, but obviously this was some sort of different layer or section. Regardless, I don't know who actually left the encounter alive between those agents and the creature. I couldn't hear anything anymore with the distance I had put between all of them and myself. But I knew whoever survived would come looking for me, and I wanted nothing to do with either. I didn't want to keep standing out in the middle of the hallway and leave myself as an easy target. Part of me was forgetting the creature might not be the only one in here, and the gunfire going on earlier didn't help. So I put my hand on the doorknob and turned it. To my surprise, the door swung open with a slight creak. I stepped in and shut it behind me. I didn't see a lock of any kind, though, so instead I went and pushed a couple of the student desks up against it, hoping it would provide me with just a bit more peace of mind. While I could tell this place was abandoned, most of the supplies and actual material still looked mostly intact, save for the dust and little bits of moisture. Over on what I assumed to be the teacher's desk was a black cover notebook and a mug full of pens and pencils next to it. I went to approach it, only to stop dead in my tracks by the sound of sudden movement taking place just outside the door to the classroom. My heart froze, and I kept still. This movement wasn't a constant, abundant pitter-patter like the creature, and it was far too heavy to be human footsteps, so it had to be something I had yet to encounter. Once the initial terror passed over me, I immediately dropped low and maneuvered my way underneath the teacher's desk, letting my back rest against the thick metallic tower of drawers that doubled as a support leg. I was fully hidden. I knew whatever it was wouldn't be able to see me, and yet it didn't ease my nerves in the slightest. But how could it? Especially when I could pick up the faint yet potent sound of its heavy breaths coming through the door. It was looking through the window in the door, waiting for the slightest noise or hint of movement to occur. I had no idea what this thing even looked like, and I didn't want to. I kept holding my breath despite not needing to. Every second felt like an eternity. I got to a point where I thought my heart would explode, but then I heard its monstrous footsteps once more as its heavy breath faded away, allowing me some emotional relief as I finally exhaled. It was leaving, losing interest after failing to pick up on my presence. I slowly peeked my head around the support of the desk and glanced over at the window of the door, only to see that whatever it was longer there. But I still didn't want to leave the room, not for a while, but I knew I'd have to eventually. I slowly slid out from underneath the desk and stood up, grabbing both a pen and the notebook placed on top of it, before returning underneath the desk. I'm going to write all of this down. I need this to reach someone, somewhere. I need to continue getting my story out there. If you all don't hear from me again, then I guess that means I didn't make it. But this needs to be exposed, and the world needs to know. Be careful where you step, remain cautious of where you go. Because there are fates a whole lot worse than death, and falling into the expanse is one of them. It all started because I had to go to the bathroom. I was on my way home after having worked a double, and if I had just gone before I left work, it wouldn't have been a problem. I was in such a hurry to get home because I knew I was going to have to go back and do it again in 8 hours. My relief had called out about 30 minutes before my shift ended, and though the manager was sympathetic, he said I had to stay unless I could find someone to work for me. 8 hours later, I staggered out the front door and into my car so I could go home and pass out in time to do it again tomorrow. I was about halfway home when I was struck with the overwhelming urge to use the bathroom. It wasn't one of those you can hold it kind of warnings. It was a you are going to pee in the toilet or pee in your pants, but you only have about 2 minutes or so to pull the trigger on that decision kind of warnings. I was about 20 minutes from home, and every place I passed on the way was dark and locked up for the night. I had just about decided to pull over to the side of the road when I saw the comfortable glow of a Dollar General sign in the distance. I pulled in, figuring if it was actually open I'd use their bathroom, and if not I'd just go behind the building. It was about 10:30 at night, and I was surprised when I saw that the open sign was lit up. The sign was a little different too, not the usual Dollar General logo, and as I got closer, I saw that I had pulled into a Dollar General beyond. It wasn't a type of Dollar General I was familiar with, but beggars could hardly be choosers. I heard the comfortable ding of the automatic door as I walked inside, and it put me at ease. The personal speakers that some manager had rigged into the sound system were playing soft rock from one of the local stations, and the overhead fluorescents flickered and crackled in a way that makes you think they were just about to go out. The doors closed behind me with an almost ominous thump, but I shook it off as my bladder throbbed again. I found a tired-looking blonde woman standing behind the counter, and she seemed barely coherent. She didn't even look at me when I walked in, and when I asked for the bathroom key, she turned her head minutely and offered me a fluorescent pink fly swatter with a key hooked to the bottom. I nearly ran to the bathroom, slipping the key in as I opened the door and paused in confusion. I opened the door to find another Dollar General. It was the same as when I went in. The same stagnant soft rock played over the speakers. The same fluorescent buzzed overhead. The same tired salt and pepper fake linoleum scuffed underfoot. I was a little mesmerized as I stepped inside, the feeling of vertigo momentary but awful as I let the door snap shut behind me. My need to pee was forgotten as I looked around, and I would be too distracted to remember it for a while. There were only 2 differences between this Dollar General and the one I had stepped out of. One was the disappearance of the blonde woman. I had thought maybe I had just gotten turned around somehow. Just a tired trick of the mind until I walked up to the counter. The woman was gone. But it wasn't something that seemed odd right away. She had probably gone into the office to count the drawers so she could go home, and I rang the bell on the desk as I called for help. I rang it a dozen or so times, calling loudly for someone, but no one ever came out. I jumped the counter then, but the office behind it was empty. I checked the back, checked every aisle, but they were empty too. The second difference was that all the doors out of the store were locked and refused to budge. It was getting too weird by now, and I really wished I had just peed behind the store. I went to the doors and pushed on them, looking for a lock or something, but there was nothing on the smooth surface. There was no mechanism to unlock the door, either. The door was simply unmoving. I went into the back, meaning to go out the back door, but that door was also locked. After about 30 minutes of looking for a key or some way out, I sat down on the counter and decided that maybe I had been locked in for the night. The blonde had looked half brain dead and had probably just left suddenly and locked me in. If she had, then why leave the lights and the music on? I pondered it for a few minutes, but eventually, I just shrugged and decided to call the police so they could come get me. I didn't want one of the cops to drive by on a routine patrol and think I was stealing. What's more, I had to be back at work before Dollar General opened up. My boss was not going to be happy if I was late, and was unlikely to believe I was trapped in a Dollar General, so I took out my cell phone. But when I dialed 911, all I got was weird static. I dialed a few more numbers, but each time I did, the static got louder and angrier, and eventually, I stopped trying. The 5G, however, still worked, so I guess that's lucky for you guys. I decided that if I couldn't reach them, I would at least tell them what was going on. I opted to make a sign so that if someone saw me, they wouldn't think I was here robbing the place. So I set about looking for something to make a sign with, and luckily for me, it was a Dollar General. About 2 minutes later, I had a sign made out of construction paper taped to the door, letting them know that I was stuck in here and needed help. After that, I stepped away from the door and tried to decide what to do now. My bladder groaned again, and I remembered why I had stopped here in the first place. I opened the door to the bathroom and hey, wouldn't you know it, but there was another Dollar General in there. I must have opened the bathroom door and stepped through about 4 times before I just decided to go in the water fountain. My business completed, I decided to have a bite. I walked around, finding some cold sandwiches and chips, a soda, and a little ice cream, and took it to the front. The self-checkout wouldn't work, so in the end, I just left some money on the counter and figured I'd pay the difference when they opened tomorrow. As I sat eating, the food balanced in my lap as the law chair I'd found allowed me to eat off something other than the floor. I found myself feeling oddly uncomfortable. This wasn't the kind of place you were supposed to eat in. It was tantamount to camping in a car wash, and it felt like something was watching me as I munched my food. I had set up near the door, and as I found my eyes straying back to it again and again, I noticed something else strange. I was next to a pretty busy road, and approaching midnight or not, I should have seen headlights of some kind by now. We were right beside a pretty busy highway, and the idea that not so much as a log truck of a delivery vehicle had cruised by all night was very strange. It was then that I noticed, after looking back at the door for about the 10th time in 2 minutes, that my sign was gone. I left my food in the chair, thinking maybe it had fallen down, but it was nowhere to be found either. The tape I had used to stick it up there, the markers I had left on the counter, even the package of poster board was gone. I walked around saying hello again, thinking someone had come and found my mess before cleaning it up, but I was still alone in the store. I made a new sign and hung it up in the window, and as I returned to my slightly melted ice cream, I kept looking back at it. I looked at it mistrustfully, waiting for it to disappear again, but it stayed stuck to the door just as the last one had, until it had suddenly gone missing. That was, after finishing my little dinner. I grabbed some bedding from an end tap near the middle of the store and some chair pads from the same area. I figured I wouldn't get more than a few hours before someone came in and asked what the hell I thought I was doing, and settled in to get some sleep. I tried to send a text to my boss to let him know what was going on, but the text just sat there unsent. I sighed and closed my eyes, getting comfy as I tried to fall asleep. I nodded off eventually and woke up 10 hours later to much the same scene. I was a little concerned when I looked at my phone and saw what time it was, but I was even more concerned when I realized the sun still wasn't up. No one had tried to call me, and no one had arrived to ask me what the hell I was doing. And that was when I sat down to write this. As I said, the 5G seems to work very well, but I can't so much as make a phone call from my phone. The outlets seem to work as well, and there are plenty of chargers here to keep my phone from dying. I don't seem to be in any danger of starving either. I have food, water, and power, but no way out. I don't know how long I can stay here or wherever I am, but it appears I have found something incredible and inescapable. It's funny, My friends and I used to joke about the number of Dollar Generals in any given place. They always seemed to get closer and closer to each other, and I once made a joke about how one day I'd turn down an aisle and find myself in a completely different Dollar General. Enter the back area, a new Dollar General location. Fall through a hole in the floor. You'd drop right into a newly constructed Dollar General. We'd laugh about it over our beers, but it seems a lot less funny now. I'll keep you all posted. I suppose this would count as my first day in Dollar General Beyond, and I'll let you know if I discover anything new, if you come across one. I cannot stress enough to avoid Dollar General Beyond at all costs. If you do, for God's sake, don't enter the bathroom. There are forces at work that I don't think anyone understands. Hey everyone, I have no idea how long I've been in the Dollar General Beyond, but I figure it's been about a week. I've been keeping notes in my journal. It's the purple one with the glitter cover, if you must know, so I could update you guys on what I've learned about this place. It isn't a lot. I'm still getting used to the jab, but I have made a few little discoveries. First, let me answer a few of your more burning questions. Yes, all my social media works, but most of my friends seem to think I'm just having a go at them. The ones who do call the police for me message me back and tell me to stop messing around. I've had my account seized on Facebook because they think I've been hacked, but Reddit still seems to work pretty well. Some of you have brought up the bathroom situation. I can pee down the sink in the back, but for number twos I've set up a bucket with a bag in it. I've been putting the bags in the manager's office and just kinda don't go in there. The doors do not open and the glass will not break, as I will explain later. Keep them coming though, guys, and I'll answer some more on the next one. My first discovery was that the things inside the jab are finite. Jab is what I started calling the place to save time, because spelling out Dollar General Beyond got old pretty quickly. The stuff that's here doesn't seem to spoil. At least none of the packages have dates on them, but they do run out. You'd think it would take you a while to go through all the stuff in the store, but you'd be wrong. 7 sleeps, since there are no days here. After I got stuck here, I was out of the sandwiches I liked. The coffee drinks I usually drink were starting to get a little low, and the ice cream was gone. I may have been doing a little stress eating, but most of it is the unnoticed replenishment that we all take for granted. I tried to find more in the back, but the back is just a big open space. There are some hand trucks back there and a couple of those pump-up lift things, but no product to put on the shelf. This leads me to the second thing. There is no way out of the jab. The doors are still locked and I can't see anything out of the windows. There may be things out there, but they seem content to ignore me or are unaware that I'm here. The doors in the back are also unmoving, and I looked for something big to break the front windows with, but that only solidified rule number 2. I found a lug wrench in the automotive section, but it simply bounces off the glass and doors. It doesn't seem to damage them. Nothing beyond little dents. And I finally just gave up when I got tired. While I was laying on the floor, my chest working like an accordion, I noticed the ceiling. I scampered to the back and found a ladder near the wall that they probably used for changing out the ceiling tiles and took it to the floor so I could climb into the ceiling. I thought that if I could make a hole in the roof, it's just a green metal roof, I could get out and see where I was. I took some cutting implements and got the biggest ladder I could find in the back. But as I slid one of the ceiling tiles aside, I saw not an attic space but a giant pulsating void. I reached a hand out to it, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. It was as if something was repelling me. And after standing up there for a few minutes or hours or however long I was on that ladder, I climbed down. I try not to think about it if I can help it. I've started doing things in the store to keep my mind busy, and they've sort of colored my days. If day 1 was figuring things out and day 2 was getting settled, then day 3 was when I sat down to color. I had meant to go get some mouthwash when I saw the rack of color books on the stationery aisle. There were all kinds of coloring books. Avengers and princesses, dinosaurs and sea creatures. And before I knew it, I had a pack of colored pencils opened and was filling the pages. I spent most of that day coloring in animals of various kinds or superheroes or the intricate designs in the adult coloring books. Heck, I colored in some of the regular books too, and I grabbed a couple of the more interesting ones to read off the spindle rack at the end of the aisle. On day 4, I set about building as many of the Lego sets that were on the toy aisle as I could. You wouldn't imagine that a Dollar General would have a lot of them, but I spent the better part of 12 hours putting Legos together. Spaceships, dinosaurs, buildings, vehicles. I assembled them all and began flying or driving them around the floor half-heartedly. By the end of the day, I was just throwing them at the front door and watching them smash to pieces. I told myself it was to make it harder for anything coming in, but I really just liked the way they went to pieces when they hit the glass. Day 5 was spent cooking and making crafts. I used the gas stoves they sell to cook a few dishes from the cookbooks, and I even ate a few of them. I had found a cookbook on the shelf and had the ingredients for most of the dishes, so I figured why not give it a try. After that, I built a bunch of the crafts on the craft aisle, inflated some of the inflatable pool toys, and had a tea party with them, and really just kind of had fun. This was honestly a time of relaxation for me more than anything. I had worked myself to the bone for years, and the ability to just kind of exist was nice for a change. I had been sent home for about 2 months with pay during COVID, and the longer I stayed here, the more I realized I missed it. I missed getting paid to exist, doing things I liked, and just having fun. It wasn't actual fun though, I guess. It was more like when you're a kid at daycare and waiting for your mom to pick you up while you play with their toys. It all came to a head on the 6th day. I woke up, excited to find something else to do, but the longer I looked, the less I found to do. I put on some clothes from the clothing section, but I couldn't find anything that was my size. I found some pants that were too big and a shirt that was too small, and threw them both on the floor as I just decided to keep my old clothes from yesterday. I went to the toy aisle, but nothing caught my eye, and after stepping on a Lego truck with my bare foot, I went to find some shoes. I then went to make some breakfast, but I was kind of over it. I settled for grilled cheese before going to find something to occupy myself. Most of the crafts were built. Most of the books were colored or read, and I was struggling to find something to keep my mind occupied. I found one of those old plug-in games, the kind you plug into a TV and play games on. But I couldn't find a TV to attach the cords to. I went to bed that night feeling frustrated and realized some of the magic was gone from my sanctuary-turned-prison cell. Then on day 7 okay, this sounds a little childish, but I got fed up and went around wrecking things. It started with something small. I woke up with a pain in my neck, surrounded by inflatable toys, and went to go get a coffee drink. I stank. I could smell myself after not having showered in 5 days, and decided I might try to set up a camp shower. I was still hoping to wake up and discover that this was some kind of dream I was having, but the longer it went on, the less sure I was. So I went to get the coffee drink, a Starbucks mocha frap, from the cooler, but they were out. I didn't remember drinking the last one, but I guess I must have. There was a whole row of French vanilla beside it, but suddenly that made me even angrier. I didn't want French vanilla. I didn't want microwave toasters cooked in the microwave I'd found in the break room. And I didn't want to be stuck in a Dollar General with no one to talk to anymore. I took one of the French vanilla drinks, stepped back, and hurled it through the glass front of the refrigerator. It shattered, spilling glass and coffee all over the floor, and made another discovery right then. Number 3. That felt really good. I did again, and again, and again when I ran out of glass. I threw a few at the front door, but it didn't break. After that, I went on a rampage through the aisles. I smashed all my crafts, threw all my Legos, popped my inflatable friends with scissors or knives or just by jumping on them, tossed soda bottles, watched the tops burst as they went flying, and basically had a tantrum that would befit any child under 6. When I was done, I lay in the wreckage, making snow angels in a pile of chips I had poured out, and as I panted heavily, I felt a little better. I had pushed over a few of the shelves as well, and between 2 of them, the slant they made seeming to form an arrow, I saw something else I had done. In my chaos, something had hit one of the ceiling tiles, and now all that blackness could be seen. I started to worry about that, but it was burnt away in the face of my newfound adrenaline. I climbed onto the 2 shelves, shifting a little as they groaned mutinously, and looked into that void. It was still just hanging up there, motionless overhead, and I grabbed something from the top of the fallen shelf and tossed it towards the space. I didn't write down what it was, but I guess it doesn't matter because it never came out of that space again. I grabbed something else, had reared back to fling again, but I stopped halfway through my throw. Something about that darkness made me very uneasy. The way it moved after I had tossed something into it made it seem angry. I know how that sounds. How can darkness seem angry? But it did. It seemed to watch me as I prepared to throw, daring me to let it fly and see what happened. I let whatever it was fall to the ground and went down to get ready for bed. I was tired, exhausted from my day of destroying my prison, and I decided to drag my bedding under the shelves I had dropped together. 1. It made it feel like I had shelter. And 2, it was the cleanest part of the floor with the least crap on it. 3. I guess, was that if it all collapsed on top of me, at least I wouldn't be stuck here. I had scratched that last part out of my journal, but I think it's important to have it now. It speaks a lot to my state of mind. I must have dozed off for a little bit because when I came awake I was surprised to see that something had changed. The store was completely dark. The store lights had never gone off in the week that I had been here, not unless they went off after I went to sleep, and the new dark was highly unsettling. I wondered if that was what had woken me up, but as the shelves groaned again, I realized it had been something else. Whatever that something else was, it was now perched on top of my makeshift structure. For the first time in a week, I had something else here with me, and the knowledge made my blood run cold. I was under a big pile of blankets and inflatables that I had dragged here, and I snuggled down beneath them like a kid when he thinks there's a monster in his closet. I heard it moving around, heard it making its careful way off the shelves and across the mess I had created. The way it moved made me believe it was huge and hunkered to fit in the space, but I refused to peek and see what it was. It made noises of discomfort more than once, clearly coming down on some of the sharper bits of my mess, and I closed my eyes and tried to stay as quiet as I could. I wasn't sure if it was dangerous, and I didn't know if it would hurt me, but I knew enough to know that I didn't want to find out. It moved about for some indeterminable amount of time. Could be an hour as much as it could be 5 minutes, but eventually, it left and I could see the lights blink back to life as they came on again. Whatever it had been, it had killed the lights, and I made a note to watch out for that in the future. Eventually, I gave up on sleep and got up to see what was still eatable in the destroyed ruins of my cell. After finding some unopened chips, a mostly intact pizza, and some soda that I hadn't wrecked, I sat down to eat breakfast and write this. I decided to transcribe the journal into my phone, just in case something happens to it. And I've also decided to go into the bathroom again. It brought me here the first time. Maybe it can take me back again. Even if it doesn't, maybe it will take me somewhere else. I've ruined all my food here during my tantrum, and if it brings me right back here, then I guess I'll have to salvage what's left and try to live as long as I can. Looking through the door now, the Jeb on the other side looks very different than the one I'm in. It looks like this one when I first came through, and I'm hoping that if it doesn't take me back where I came from then, maybe it will take me somewhere that less wrecked. Wish me luck. Either way, that's all for now. Hopefully, there will be a chance for more some other time. Hey there everyone, it's me again. It's been about, I don't know how long since my last update, and I've made some new discoveries since. So, when I went through the door, I had a backpack, my journal, and a charger with a butt. I was wearing a fresh pair of basketball shorts, some flip-flops, and a shirt for some sports team or another. I had also stuck a few undestroyed bits of food in the backpack, and as I passed within the room I closed my eyes and prayed I would come out in my world. No such luck. But I did step out into a brand new Dollar General beyond. The shelves were upright. The floor may not have gleamed, but it was clean, and the shelves and coolers were stocked for another day of business. Stranger still was the change that came over me. When I walked through I had been holding the straps of my backpack, praying under my breath for escape. But as I walked in my hands suddenly grabbed nothing, and I felt jeans on my legs and boots on my feet again. I looked down to find my work shirt, the logo for Rocco Subs across the front, and took inventory of myself before going on. Discovery 4, you can't take things with you from other Dollar Generals. Only the things I brought into the Dollar General Beyond stayed with me when I traveled. Traveling is what I have called it when I go into the bathroom and step into a new Dollar General Beyond. My phone, my wallet, my work ID, the 27 cents I had from something earlier that day, and the granola I had crumpled up in my back pocket travel with me. Anything I try to bring through from other DGBs does not come with me. It's not a big problem. I can get more chargers or supplies when I get there. But it's a little jarring to feel the backpack disappear off your back. As such, I have started keeping my journal here on my phone since the words and notes seem to come along with me too. This brings us to the next thing. Discovery 5: the stores reset themselves when you travel. The jag I walked into looked similar to the one I had left, and the stock was back and in place. I say similar because the inflatables are gone in favor of autumn items. There's decorative pumpkins on the seasonal shelves. There are fall items throughout the store, and many of the coffee drinks now have pumpkin spice in their midst. Everything else is the same, but it's like the store goes through little changes when you go to a new one. I still couldn't leave. The doors refused to open. But the lights are on and the music is still playing, so that's not too bad. Plus, I like pumpkin spice, so that's not a big problem. This time around I started experimenting a bit with the door. I now realized that the sign I had made on the first night hadn't just gone away. When I passed back through the bathroom door, I had gone into a new dab and the sign hadn't existed there yet. I didn't bother to put one up this time, not really wanting to attract the attention of whatever might be out there anyway. I took note of my food, deciding how much I'd have before I had to move again, and figured I had about 2 months of food on hand as long as I didn't go buck wild. I found some bedding and made myself a little bed area, and then I set to experimenting. I started by throwing things through the door. It started with action figures. I probably tossed about 24 army men through the door before realizing I had no way to see if I could get them back. So I went to the dental aisle and got some floss. And that's when I discovered I didn't have to get them back. There was a small pile of loose army men laying on the floor of the toy aisle, just hanging out as if they had tumbled there from nowhere. The other store had rejected them, sending them back to their point of origin. And I looked at the dental floss dubiously. I shrugged. It was for science. After all, I hooked it to the little base of the soldier and tossed it in. The army man disappeared into the space, and the dental floss kept spooling out as the greedy doorway to the whole box of minty rope. It came out quickly. Running out fast enough to make me think I might see smoke. And when the spool jerked as it hit the end, the little box fell out of my hand. It slid across the ground and went in too. I watched the door for a few seconds before going to see if both had gone back to their point of origin. Sure enough, the army man was in the toy aisle and the floss was in a pile on the dental aisle with the box beneath it. I picked up the dental floss and went to look for other things to throw through the doorway. I didn't really have anything living. Besides me, and I knew I could go through the portal. I settled for some bananas, but they too came back. Same with other fruits, but I had figured they would. Liquids were the same. The oil I splashed through the portal made a huge mess on the floor when it tried to go back, and I stopped after that. Nothing could go through the door other than me. Understood. That was day 8. On day 9, I looked at the data I had to see what it all meant. The only things I really knew about this place was that A, I couldn't leave. B, I could only go to copies of the same Dollar General. C, some of those copies were a little different but still similar. And D, only I could go between the places. And E, there was something else that could go between those places. It wasn't a lot to go by, but it was something. This place had rules, and rules were something I could work with. I spent a few days in that particular store, grabbing things at random and throwing them in to make sure the rules were constant. In the end, everything came back. Nothing was immune to the rules except for me. I looked for living things to throw in, but it appeared I was the only thing that lived here, which was concerning. Most stores try to keep themselves clean, but inevitably there will be bugs or even rats in a store. I checked under every shelf, in every corner, and behind every box and bag, but I couldn't find any of the usual signs of pests. No mouse crap, no spider webs, no roach bodies, no nothing. Maybe that was part of it too. I didn't know, but I made a note of it. Discover 6: there are no pests in the Dollar General beyond. After that, I decided I had done all I could do here. What else was I going to do in this store? What was I going to do in any other store? For that matter, I didn't know, but I realized that staying wasn't going to get me anywhere. I started to pack a few things but realized the futility. It would all just disappear when I went, but I did do something before moving on. I went and grabbed a permanent marker from the stationery section and drew a big letter B on the floor by the front door. I didn't know if it did, but if I ever rolled back through a store I had already been to, I wanted to be able to tell. That done, I stepped through the bathroom and into another Dollar General. It wasn't mine either, though. The store looked the same, but all the products were in a foreign language. I had taken Spanish in high school, but whatever the language was, it wasn't that. I thought it might be one of the Middle Eastern languages. I'd played enough Call of Duty and seen enough street graffiti to find it familiar but still unknown. Some of the food was different too. There were more regional cuisines, flatbreads, and strange meats. And the music playing overhead was something best described as pop with yelling. The automatic doors had also been replaced with a roll-down grate, and the grate was secured as if for the night. I ate a little of the food, the stuff that I didn't need to cook, and drew a big C on the floor near the doors before moving on again. I did this for a while, not really sure how long I was traveling, but leaving my signs behind. Some of the stores were set for different holidays. Some of them were in different languages. A couple of them had weird alien goods that I had no idea what were, and I moved on from these quickly. Some looked to be selling human meat and pieces of people. In some there was music. In some there was silence. In one the lights were black lights. In another, the floor was lit up and the ceiling was not. Some of the music was just static. In the store that sold human meat, the music was just the same screaming again and again. In all of them, I left a letter. In all of them, I hoped to find my way home and didn't. This was exciting at first. I was exploring unfound territory and seeing things that no one had ever seen before. I was a pioneer, a traveler, and I found myself filled with wonder as I hoped this trip would be my last. The different stores were cool, and I was never scared of what I saw. The rule had always been that I was the only living thing here. The rule had always been that there was nothing in any of these places that would hurt me. I had put the creature out of my mind, thought perhaps I had dreamed it, and as time went by, I couldn't tell you how long I spent just going from one to the next to the next. In some I spent days, in others I spent minutes. When I was tired, I slept. When I was hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went. It wasn't until I drew a Z on the ground of a particular Dollar General, one with a strange mixture of French and Spanish products that all seemed to be made of lamb meat, that I realized how long I had been doing this. This was the 26th one I had been to. I had been going straight through many of them, and I had yet to see anything beyond the front door other than the murk of night of darkness or whatever. I hadn't found anyone else either, and that was beginning to worry me. I also hadn't run back over any of my letters, which was less worrisome, since it meant that there might not be an end to these stores. I found I'd been looking at the Z on the floor for several minutes before shaking it off and heading back for the bathroom. Nothing to do now but carry on. It would be another 7 stores before my ideas of being alone were challenged. The letters had replaced my days by then. I could have no more told you how long I had been here than I could have told you who the King of Spain was. I had begun leaving double letters after the Z, and I figured that at some point I would have to leave triple and quadruple. I tried to sleep as little as possible, keeping moving until I had to stop. And I was yawning as I went into a store I was already thinking of as FF. I walked into a familiar scene, though I knew it wasn't the place I'd thought it was. The store was wrecked, and it was the first one I had seen out of order since the store I had trashed. I wondered if I had come back full circle, but one look at the shelves was enough to tell me I hadn't done this. All the food was labeled in a strange language that I had no clue how to read, and the doors looked like an elevator, the metal doors firmly closed. As I moved about the store, I felt like something was watching me, and I found myself turning quickly as I tried to catch sight of it. It was the first movement I had seen outside my own as I walked past a mirror. It made me paranoid to feel something watching me, and I made a meandering path towards automotive so I could find something to swing if it came after me. The lights in the back hung down by broken chains, and as they flickered I saw what I was after. The 4-way lug wasn't a perfect weapon, but as the careful, furtive movement I'd been seeing suddenly turned into a wild and stunted charge. I gripped it tightly. I turned suddenly, smashing it into whatever was coming for me. But as I lifted it to swing again, I felt my fingers grow weak. It was a person. It was a person. It was a human. At least I thought it was. He was an old man, shirtless and hunched, and his skin looked tight as it clung to his ribs. He has clearly not been eating enough, and he lifted his stick-thin arms as he tried to defend himself from me. However long he had been here, he had lost the ability to speak in something recognizable. He sputtered and chirped, making something like animal noises as he held his bleeding head and moaned in pain. I didn't wait for him to get his wits about him. I dropped the wrench and took off, sprinting for the bathroom as I leaped through the door and into a new Dollar General beyond. This one had flowers, and Mother's Day decorations festooned every end cap. But all I could do was lay there and pull my knees to my chest. I had seen another person. I had attacked the only other person I had found. Well, technically he had tried to attack me first, but I was still coming to terms with what had happened as I tried to get myself together. The food here was normal, and as I ate, I pinned this addition to my journal. The notes here are all I have to prove I'm not going crazy. It seems there are others here, though they don't seem very friendly. I've already marked the store as GG and I'm preparing to take a rest for a little while before proceeding on. I don't know what else I'll find out there, but I still remain hopeful that it will be a way out. I'll keep you posted. Pray for me. I still hope to come out of this alive. I know it's been a little bit, or maybe it hasn't, but I hope you guys haven't worried about me too much. It's been a really productive few days lately. I met someone and he really helped me figure this out. He also helped me learn a few things that I wasn't aware of. Some things that scared the hell out of me. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me tell you what's happened since I last posted. I spent several days in GG, the store with the Mother's Day decorations, just getting my head together. You may have a hard time believing this, but I don't often have to attack people in my day-to-day life. Every now and again you may have to bump chests with a rowdy customer at the sub shop, but I hadn't actually had to fight another human being since high school. The thought that I might have killed the guy was repugnant to me, and I was afraid to move on to the next one. What if I found another person like that? What if I found a whole tribe of them? The person who had slept below the shelves and prayed they would crush him seemed like worlds away from me. And I found that maybe I did want to keep living. After a few days of eating and feeling sorry for myself, I collected up the things that would come with me and stepped through the bathroom door again. I went back to my usual routine, but finding another person made me think. Was I the only one leaving markings? Was I the only one marking the stores in case I needed to find my way back? I looked around, but I never found anything beyond the usual graffiti or vandalism. Rude words scrawled on the door by the bathroom, sometimes in English, and sometimes not. I also found hearts with initials, catchphrases, and the usual things that children do. It meant nothing until I saw something different in KK. I had been traveling slower, really looking for the signs of other people, and that's when I found the bulletin board. I knew something was different when I walked into KK. The shelves weren't full like the others had been. They weren't empty. Not really. But they were sparse and looked picked over. Things were out of place too. This store had furniture, and some of it had been arranged in a way that made me think people had been sleeping close for comfort. The ceiling tiles were hanging down too, something I didn't like, and the music was nothing but harsh static. Also, there was a sign written on poster board in the front window. I blinked at it when I noticed it, thinking it might be mine. Someone had scrolled a similar message on the other side, but this side would only be seen by people already in the store. The writing was messy, scribbled with a magic marker, but it was readable, and it filled me with hope that the crazy hermit might not be the norm. If you can read this, check the bulletin boards in the break room. When I come back here, I'll answer your message. It was like a bomb going off in my head, and I kicked myself for not looking. How many break rooms had I been in? How many times had I used the microwave or opened the fridge to see what was inside? I had passed by the corkboard 1,000 times, but never once had I thought to read it. It would be things I had no interest in, things for employees, but it seemed now that might not be the case. I hurried behind the counter and went to check the board, finding a treasure trove of knowledge. Their name was Gale, and they had pinned a good many things there. Rules of the DG: don't go outside. There's nothing out there. The food runs out. So don't hog it all. The food doesn't go bad, so don't worry about that. Whatever you do here, stays here. Don't go into the ceiling. No one comes back from the ceiling. Don't be afraid to leave. There's nothing for you here once it's gone. Another piece of paper had a picture of a big dark creature that had been colored in with a crayon. The miasma. Don't let it see you or you'll die. Don't go into the ceiling or it will get you. The last one seemed to be a goodbye letter, and it was in the same handwriting as the others. I feel bad that I couldn't bury you properly, so let this serve as your memorial. Here lies Kenneth, Margot, Rudy, and Celine. They were the best crew anyone could ask for, and I miss them every day. Kenneth, who was never late for work and always so full of adventure. Lost when he went outside. Margot, so full of life and hope. Lost to the thing that lives in the ceiling. Rudy, my son, who wanted more than his old man could give him. Lost in the ceiling when he went to go get Margot. Celine, who always made sure we ate before she would. Went through the door when I was too cowardly and hard-headed. Let this stand as their gravestones. Let this tell their tale. I hope to find Celine when I go through that door. I'm still scared. I'm still hard-headed. But the food won't last forever. And I have to do something. If Rudy is out there somewhere, then I'd rather die trying to find him than starving to death in this place. To whoever reads this, don't be afraid to go through the door, and I hope to see you on the other side. Gail Thornton, Assistant Manager of Dollar General Beyond Story 4891. I didn't know whether I should leave anything or not. This looked like a memorial more than a notice board. But if Gail came back here, I wanted him to know that someone else was out there. Paper was easy to come by. Ditta pens, and I scribbled a hasty introduction before pressing it to the surface with a push pin. It looked lame beside Gail's words, but it was the best I had. I ate a little of what was left, leaving my mark before moving on. When I traveled now, besides leaving my mark, I always checked the bulletin boards. Sometimes there were messages from Gail, but mostly there weren't. Sometimes there were other messages though. Usually, it was people looking for people or people looking for people who were lost. Some of the bulletin boards looked like the missing walls at rest stops. And two that I saw a lot were someone looking for a boy named Jacob and someone looking for a dog named Buddy. Looking for my grandson Jacob. 5 years old. Blue shirt. Blue jean shorts. Skechers light-up shoes. If you see him, keep him safe. He liked mac and cheese. Disappeared when he went to the bathroom on accident. Border collie named Buddy. Black and white with some brown. Blue bandana around neck. Very sweet. Good service dog. Would love to see him again. The former made my blood run cold, and the more I tried to put it out of my mind, the more it stuck. Jacob. The name the old man had screamed as he lay bleeding. Was he Jacob? Was he the one looking for Jacob? I didn't know. But it didn't matter either. I couldn't get back to him, and I had no clue where his grandson was regardless. I would leave notes of my own, letting them know that I was leaving the letters if they came across them, and telling them a little about the places I could remember. It was like having pen pals, except you were never sure whether they were getting your letters and you had no way to get letters back from them. In that respect, I guess it was more like sending messages in a bottle. It went on like that for a little. But when I came to BBB, I found out that someone had seen one of my messages and left a response. Dear Alphabet Man, very clever. I like your ingenuity. I'm glad you found the bulletin boards and have figured this place out a little. Hopefully, we can find each other someday. It would be nice to see a friendly face. Gail. I was thrilled. Finally, someone was responding back to me. I had felt guilty about not trying to communicate with the old man, but this made me feel a little better. If we could get together, we could share knowledge. If we could meet, then maybe we could figure this out. I kept going, each new store hoping to find Gail. But each new store seemed to find me a couple of steps behind. He was leaving messages, leaving answers to old messages sometimes, but I never seemed to catch him. Gail and I were moving through this space differently, it seemed, and Gail was better at it than I was. Gail, I came to believe, could move backward as well as forwards. 2 Alphabet Men saw your mark, the one labeled K. Be careful if you find yourself there again. Sometimes there are shadows there that like people a little too much. Gail, 2 Alphabet Man, I thought I had gone to the hermit store for a minute, but I see this may be where you began your journey. Try not to destroy any more of them. They aren't as infinite as you may believe. Gail, 2 Alphabet Men found your stovetop in the place you call SS. Hope the eggs were good. And thanks for leaving me some. Gail, this went on for 3 or 4 more trips before I found the message I was looking for. JH, the spot I had found myself in, looked very different from the other stores I'd been to. It looked picked clean, every shelf emptied and bare. Someone had collected a pile of things from the store and attempted to burn the door. It smelled like they had used lighter fluid to start, and the ceiling tiles by the door had fallen as they charred and left a wide, gaping maw above the door. But, however, was none the worse for wear. I skirted the edge of the ceiling hole and made my way toward the break room. I didn't expect to find anything, but I was surprised to find the break room still intact. On the board was a message written on the back of a charred newspaper. Alphabet Man, I hate to leave you in a place like this, but if you keep to your current path, you should be here in a couple of days. Stay here for 2 sleeps. There is food in the back as well as water, and if I haven't made it by then, it means something has happened, and you should move on. With any luck, we'll meet up in 2 days' time. Looking forward to seeing you. Gail. I read the message a few times. Not sure if I wanted to stay here or not. This place was creepy, to be sure. But the chance to meet Gail was something I couldn't pass up. I checked on the food he had mentioned and found several days' worth of water and non-perishable foods that someone had stuck in the back. There was no sign of whoever had set the fire, and I hoped that I had the place to myself. I dragged some bedding and food to the break room, feeling that I'd rather hide in there than in the open, and settled in for the next couple of days. I kept the door to the break room closed, and if anything moved out there, I didn't hear it the first night. I mostly rested the next day, glad for the opportunity to do so. I had been going strong for a long time, resting when I was ready to fall down, and it was nice to get a little downtime. I wished it was somewhere a little nicer, but even this place told me things I didn't know. The doors, it seemed, were very resilient, but that made me wonder about Gail's story. He said that Kenneth had made it out those doors, and I wondered how such a thing was possible. The doors seemed unmovable, and the longer I thought about it, the more I couldn't wait to hear his story when he got here. As I settled in for the second night, though, I heard something groan from the main floor and huddled deeper under my blankets. It was the exact same sound I had heard as I lay under the shelves, and as I listened to it move through the bones of the store, I realized I had trapped myself in my pursuit of safety. If it came in here after me, I'd have no way to escape. But if I could make it to the bathroom, I could escape and touch base with Gail some other time. He would understand, especially if this was miasma, and I pushed the blankets away as I crept towards the door. I could hear it moving on the other end of the store, and as I opened the door, I prayed it wouldn't squeak. If it made a noise, it was unnoticed by the creature, and I prepared to make a break for it. Looking around the doorframe, I felt my ambition drain away as I caught sight of the creature in new terror. It was huge. Its shadowy form stooped over, and it looked like nothing I had ever seen. It was darkness, a living fog bank of midnight, and as my teeth threatened to clack, glanced at the bathroom and tried to steel myself for my run. That's when I saw something that pushed my apprehension away, and I was filled with renewed drive. Over by the bathroom, peeking around the side of the alcove, was a person in a red vest with a salt and pepper crew cut. He saw me too, and as he nodded his head, telling me to come there. He tossed something towards the back of the store. The bottle burst with a loud pop and the creature growled like a mudslide. It lunged towards the back, slamming into the back wall, and I took my chance and ran. It heard me then, turning its ponderous form as it tried to give chase, but I was out of its reach. Gail grabbed my wrist, and as we lunged through the bathroom door, the thing was mere inches behind us. As we lay outside the bathroom, the new Dollar General a pleasant sight after the burnt-out husk we'd come from. The man smiled at me and offered me a hand. It's nice to meet you properly, Alphabet Man. I'm Gail, but I suspect you already figured that out. I know. It's been longer than you likely wanted to wait to hear more. I've been in a place the last few days that I've been calling Jab Zero. It's a place I've never been but seems to be where Gail has been staying. There isn't any real difference between DG Zero and any other store. But Gail has been living there for, well, a long time and says it's his kind of base of operations. What's more, Gail can bring things between stores. When I asked him how, he said it was a trick he had learned, and that he might teach me if we had time. I laughed. Time was something we seemed to have a lot of. I honestly couldn't tell you how long I've been here. It never gets light out. There are no clocks inside the store. My phone time changes, but sometimes the dates and years jump ahead by years or back by centuries. Right now it says it's 3278 on Friday in September in 1632. I haven't received any replies to any of my messages or posts, but I honestly haven't checked much. I don't even really know if you guys are getting these anymore. I haven't seen a reply since the first installment. So if I haven't been responding, don't take it personal. I've certainly been a little busy. After all, before we go on, some differences between Zero and the other stores. But on to what you're dying to know. Gale is a middle-aged guy, probably about 40 or 45. He's still wearing his Dollar General uniform, complete with name badge. And he says that no matter what happens, it always comes back. The only thing that seems to stay with him are the bags under his eyes. And the guy looks tired. He made us dinner, soup and sandwiches, and toasted me with a pop from a brand I wasn't familiar with but turned out to be ginger ale. After eating a couple of bowls of stew and about 3 sandwiches, I hadn't eaten much of substances in a few days. We started talking. I told him about my life as a wage slave, and he commiserated. I know what that's like. I had actually just been transferred to this store when I got stuck here. How long ago was that? Oh, I asked, sitting back in the wicker chair he had brought from somewhere else and listening to it creak comfortably. Who knows? Gale said. When I left the world as I knew it, it was 1998, and I had just been sent to South Dakota to manage a new store. It's more pay and you can pick your own crew, my boss had said, and I was glad of more money. My ex-wife had just petitioned for more child support, the 3rd time in as many years, and I was just trying to keep fed in a bed with my head above water, he said, laughing as he took a sip of the green can that called itself CO Firm. So I left Scottsdale, where I had been managing one of the few remaining J. L. Turner and Sons, and after looking through some applications I decided that I liked the look of Kenneth, Celine, and Margot. Oh yeah, wait. I remember there was another name on your memorial. When did Rudy come along? Gale looked away then, and I tried not to notice as he teared up a little. Oh yeah, how could I forget Rudy? I had been working at the store for a few months when he called me. Rudy was a lot older than his sister, from my first marriage when I was barely more than a kid myself, and he had been managing his own store in Texas. The store, however, had burned down suddenly one night, and he was wondering if my store had a position. I know you're the manager, Dad, but I'll do stock work if I need to. The noise around here makes me think that the locals don't like me any more than they like the store, and my apartment might go up in smoke next if I stay. Dollar General had run a few of the mom and pop stores in town out of business, you see, and the locals blamed Rudy and DG for that. I called corporate, asked if I could get funding for one more worker, and Rudy came to make it 5. We were tight-knit, working long hours and trying to compete in the local market. The mom and pops in Chamberlain were dead set against losing business to us, but we held our own and carved out a niche for ourselves. We didn't run the town, but we did okay. Then, one night we got robbed. Margot and I were manning the front, Kenneth was in the back, and Celine was staying over to look over the books. She had been an accountant before taking a job that was a little more flexible, and I had promised her some overtime if she would help me balance the receipts before our yearly audit next week. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I was helping Margot through a busy time before the guy came in. We were getting ready to clean up after closing time so we could pass the audit, and Rudy was coming in around 8 to help. We'd all clean for a while, and then maintain through Sunday so we could be ready and fresh on Monday. We were just getting ready to close the doors at 8 when he barges in and pulls a gun. The guy had to be looking for drug money. He was out of his mind on something, and he rounded all of us up and put us behind the counter. He emptied the register, tried to get the safe, but it was on a timer that wouldn't even open until after 10, and made us empty our pockets and hand over our wallets. I was just thanking the universe that Rudy hadn't showed up when he popped up with a pizza after coming through the employee door around back. Thus, he joined the hostage situation. We all started out behind the counter, but the robber thought that there might be a silent alarm back there. So he moved all of us to break room, but thought we might gang up on us there. There was no door on the break room, so he finally decided to put us all in the bathroom and keep us penned up in there while he left. He herded us all through the door, and imagine our surprise when we came out in a different Dollar General. It was just like ours, except the doors wouldn't open. We didn't think about trying to go back through the bathroom. And good thing too. These Dollar Generals don't seem to look back on themselves. The bathroom only takes you to a different one. Never back the way you came. But you go back to different ones. I put in. He smiled. In due time, my friend. You probably remember the first Dollar General you stayed in for a while. I imagine it got a little boring after a while. Didn't it? I nodded, telling him it had only taken me about a week to be done with it. Well, a month. Imagine that times 5. At first it had a lot of fun. We played games, spent time together, and kind of felt like a real family. Rhodey and Margot had been having a not-so-secret relationship for months, and Kenneth and Margot and I hung out a lot outside of work. We cooked dinners. We made crafts. We built puzzles. And for a little while it was great. After a couple of weeks, though, we all started going a little cabin crazy. The sun never rose. The lights never went out. And the doors never opened. We didn't know how we were being kept here, but some of them started trying to find out. He took another sip of the ginger ale, as if wetting his throat for a long story, and pressed on. It started with Kenneth. Kenneth was an avid hiker and liked to explore. He wanted to see if the space outside the DG was the same as ours. But he couldn't get the doors open. He pushed and pulled, tried to break the glass, tried to wedge the doors open, but it was no use. He tried for 3 days to get outside, and on the 4th day something happened. Something that showed the rest of us that we might not have been as alone as we thought. The doors opened. Kenneth had been shoving at it for most of the day, trying to get the front door open and failing miserably. He finally threw it down, like a child having a tantrum, and kicked it half-heartedly with his foot. Then, to his astonishment, it opened as smoothly as it ever had. Outside was nothing but smooth darkness, like the waters of a deep lake by night. And when he took his first step, I told him not to. I felt like something out there was wrong, some place we weren't meant to go to. But he was powerless to stop himself. He stepped out into that darkness, and as he passed between the doors, they slammed shut behind him. I've never seen them open like that again, and they never opened for him to come back in again. He glanced at the doors to the Dollar General he had chosen to take up residence in, and when I glanced at it, I noticed someone had piled things in front of it. Card racks and newspaper racks and other things blocked it, as if it might open and tempt him out again. Some of them weren't in English. Some of them had odd dimensions to them, and it was clear he had ranged wide to find some of these things. Then Margot got snatched by whatever lurks in the ceiling. I call it the miasma, the thing that came after you in the burnt-out store. Had you seen it before then? Once. I admitted. Bet it was right after you started messing with the ceiling. Wasn't it? I nodded guiltily. Rudy and Margot had been looking for a way out as well. They decided that they could get out through the roof. But when they took some of the tiles down, they discovered a deep bank of darkness up there. It was just like the stuff outside the door. And when Rudy reached out to touch it, I told him not to. Rudy was a good kid, and he knew better than to touch something I was that worried about. The two of them were young, though, and when they called me over to see something, I watched as he tossed a tennis ball into the void. They had about 4 empty cans of tennis balls on the floor, and when I asked if they had all gone in, Rudy said they had. When I asked how many had come out, he told me none. I didn't think anything of it. And when he threw the cans up there, none of them came down either. I was settling and getting ready for bed. Celine already snoozing on the little sectional pieces we had all pushed in close together, when the light went out. This was alarming because the lights had never gone out before. The light stayed on all the time, which was why it was so hard to tell what time of day it was, or how long you have actually been here. There was a weird growling noise and I heard someone scream from out in the darkness. Something fell over then and I grabbed Tilene as the two of us burrowed under our pile of blankets. I was worried for Rudy and Margot, but at that point in time I was more concerned with surviving until the lights came back on. Something stumped close to Hughes, making a lot of racket as it pushed things around. But after a while the lights came on again, and we surfaced to find some shelves shoved over, and a lot of things crushed and smashed. Rudy found us not long after that, saying that he and Margot had seen a monster come out of the ceiling. It had grabbed her as he ran for the manager's office, and when the lights came back on, he had found the same mess we had. When I asked him what it looked like, he said it was hard to tell with the lights off. He drew that picture you saw in the break room, and for a while that was the best description we had of the miasma. Rudy was sullen for a few days, looking at the hole in the ceiling, but I told him to leave it be. It had clearly come out because we had messed with it, and if we left it alone, it would leave us alone. He wanted to go look for Margot, said he thought if he went up there he might be able to find her. But I told him to forget about it. We had lost 2 people already, and the thought of losing my son was difficult to think about. About 3 days later, I woke up to find a letter saying he was going to find Margot, and a ladder set up directly under the ceiling. I climbed it, meaning to go in and get him back. But after standing on that top rung and looking into the murk for nearly an hour, I finally climbed down and put the ladder away. It was just Colleen and I. We sat in silence for a few minutes, lounging on the padded sectional pieces that I now questioned whether or not had once been their sleeping arrangement. "I'm tired," he said, his voice hollow as he lay back. "Let's continue this after some shut-eye." He rolled away from me, facing the chocolate upholstery, but I doubted he slept. At some point I dozed off after trying to ignore his quiet sobbing, and woke up to find coffee, eggs, bacon, and toast. Figured you might want a nice hot breakfast after what we went through yesterday with that thing. Don't worry, it's all scavenged from stores like ours. None of it's human meat or weird animal parts or anything. I hadn't thought of that, but it was certainly an interesting concept. As we ate, he finished. Celine went last, and she may not even be dead. I was distraught after Rudy, just sitting there and feeling sorry for myself. But Celine had been experimenting with the door we had come through. She told me how she opened it to find yet another Dollar General beyond that, and when she threw things into it, they came back. I just sat, not taking in any of it. And then one day she came up to me and said she was leaving. I looked up to find she was wearing a backpack and had put on a floppy gardening hat. "Going?" I asked, not understanding. "Going where?" "We can't go anywhere. We're stuck here. The food is beginning to dwindle, even with just the 2 of us eating. It won't last much longer, and I don't intend to starve here. If that doorway took us here, then it can take us out again maybe. Come with me, even if we go somewhere else. It's got to be better than here. There might be food, or maybe Rudy and Margot are there. Maybe Kenneth is somewhere different too. Either way, if we stay here, we're going to die. Come with me. We can start over somewhere else." I wanted to. I really did. But at that point I was at my lowest. My family had abandoned me. My son had left too. And now the last of my friends was deserting me. I turned away, saying nothing. And when she left, I just sat there. She never came. At least not as far as I know. And I've never seen her in any of the stores I've traveled to. I sat there for a long time, just stewing. But eventually I was down to canned goods and the big jugs of water. When the water ran out, I drank from the fountain. When the canned good ran out, however, I started looking at the door too. There was food on the other side of that door. I could see it. And without thinking about it, I stepped through. I was in a brand new Dollar General, fully stocked with food and set up for Christmas, and that was how it all started. I never stayed long in any store then. I just kept moving, hoping I would find Celine or Ruddy or anyone. I found a few people, but the ones I found were usually scared or half crazy, and I moved on quickly. One fella, an older guy in a half-destroyed store, stabbed me with pruning shears as I went through his place. I gasped, but when he pulled up his shirt and pointed at a spot about midway up his belly, I didn't see anything. Not a scar, not a red mark, nothing. It looked as fresh as new skin, and he laughed when I looked surprised. Luckily for me, I was close enough to the door to make it through, and that's when I made my biggest discovery. I fell through the door, grabbing at the shears so I didn't push them in deeper, and found they were gone. So was the wound. You've probably noticed that no matter how ragged your clothes get, that they always repair themselves when you pass through the door, right? Well, it's the same with your body. Burns, cuts, stabs. They all heal when you go to a new store. I've had all manner of things wrong with me, but a new store always means a new me. We sat there for a few minutes, each of us digesting something different, it seemed. Did you ever find Rhodey or Margot or Kenneth? I finally asked, already guessing the answer. It was several minutes before he responded, and I wasn't sure he would for a minute. No, he finally said. They went beyond the Dollar General beyond. The store protects us, insulates us to a certain degree, but if we go beyond, and then we are lost. I've watched the store change over the years. New items added, new layouts and concepts, but I've stayed the same. I was 43 in '98, and I still look exactly the same as I did then. I haven't aged, and neither will you. The store traps us, keeps us like this, and plays with us until it inevitably breaks us. And there's nothing we can do about it. He looked sad, but when he turned back, his smile had returned. But, Harrison, he said, there are things we can do to make it harder for them to break us. Things I can show you. Gail's promised to teach me what he knows, and I'm eager to learn. I think I've shared enough for now. Gail's asleep and I can tell that the tapping from my phone is bothering him. I'll update you guys again a little later. Until then, don't get stuck in the Dollar General beyond either, or we might have to come find you as well. Till next time. Gail has taken me under his wing and is showing me his secrets to surviving in here. He's a good teacher, and I'm learning some tricks for navigating the DGBs. It's hard to explain it all, but I'm going to try my best. A lot of it is mental preparation and association, which is really hard to teach. But Gail is a pretty good teacher, and I'm starting to get the hang of it. The first lesson was how the DGBs work. All the Dollar Generals are like spokes on a bike tire. They all move forward, never backward. You can't go back simply by going through the door. Wherever you entered from is your first spoke on the wheel. That's why everyone's journey starts at a different part. My first spoke is different from yours, and my last spoke will be different from yours. There are a nearly infinite number of Dollar Generals. At least I've never seen one repeat itself by going through the door. I'm sure there must be an end to them, but I'm not sure I want to see what that looks like any more than you do. Are you with me so far? I nodded, but thinking about it made my head hurt a little. Traveling the spokes, the stores, is easy. You just go through the door. Navigating the stores is a little harder. The way I did it was to think of the stores as spokes on a wheel, but a wheel needs a hub. This store is my hub. It's the middle point where I come to get out of the wheel. Technically, it's a spoke too, but thinking of it as a hub helps ground yourself. You get it. I waffled a little, not wanting to admit that it was a little over my head. Kinda? So, Gail laughed. Don't worry. You'll pick it up. It's like riding a bike. Once you do it, it's easy. In that he wasn't wrong. Lesson number 2 was traveling with people. So, if you're traveling with other people, you have to be touching them for the two of you to travel together. Here, put a hand on my shoulder, he said as he prepared to step through the door. I slid a hand on his shoulder and we stepped through together into a familiar store. It was KK, the place I had found Gail's bulletin board. See, he said. That's how we came out in my Dollar General when we left the miasma behind. I had a hand on your back, so we came through together. That made sense. And we proceeded with lesson 3, traveling to specific places. You've done yourself a favor by leaving marks behind. At first I was popping around to stores I remembered, like the ones with weird letters or the ones with strange things in them. But once I started leaving my own markings, I could travel to specific places. Pick out one of the stores you've been to before, and let's go there. He put a hand on my shoulder this time, but when I walked through the door, we came out on LL instead of GG, the store with the Mother's Day decorations. I was a little disappointed, but Gail patted my shoulder reassuringly. It's tricky, he assured me. Took me a while to figure it out too. Let's try again. Picture the marks you left. Close your eyes and get a good mental picture, and then step through the door. I tried it again. And really focusing on the twin G's. But when I stepped through this time, it was to find myself in an older location with a single G on the floor. When I told him I'd goofed again, however, he told me it was progress. You're getting the hang of it. Going to G when thinking ugh GG is pretty damn close. Keep practicing. We spent a while just traveling from one store to the next. Sometimes it got close. Sometimes I just moved forward. But after a while I started to travel to the right destination sometimes. It was something that took a lot of focus. And when I put a hand to my head and told him I was getting a headache, Gail suggested we take a break, have a rest, drink some water or Gatorade or maybe some coffee and just kind of take it easy for a bit. It isn't something you can get right away. It takes practice. And even I sometimes get it wrong after all this time. I can't say how long we were at it, but for what must have been a few days we worked on pinpointing my navigation through the stores I had been to already. I saw a lot of familiar places, though Gail refused to go to the meat market store as he called it. He said he had encountered shadows there that thought he might be for sale and he had barely escaped with his life. I figured I must have gone while they were closed and counted myself lucky. After a while I could travel pretty well between stores without too much trouble. And when Gail was pretty confident that I had the process down, he suggested we move on to something else. Lesson 4 involved bringing other things with you to other stores. So your clothes travel with you because you don't think about them coming with you. It's like your nose or your hands. They're a part of you and your mind just assumes that they will. Now I want you to take a good look at yourself and visualize what you look like in your clothes. Once you have it committed to memory, then you can add things to it and take them with you. He had me practice in front of a full-length mirror, inspecting myself and committing my clothes to memory. The clothes weren't hard. I had worked at the same place for years and was very aware of what my uniform looked like. No, the hard part was adding to it. I found the most colorful backpack in the store, but committing it to memory was difficult. If it wasn't just right, then it wouldn't come with me. And Gail assured me that the backpack was all I needed to get right. Once you have the backpack down, everything you zip inside is inside. You don't really have to remember it because it's inside the bag and you know it's inside the bag. Once you have the bag down, the rest is cake. That one took a while and gave me many headaches. Sometimes the bag wouldn't come with me. Sometimes the bag would, but the things inside wouldn't. Sometimes the bag would, but I would concentrate so hard on the bag that I wouldn't travel where I wanted to go. Sometimes I would load it up with stuff and find the bag had stayed where I had been. Gail told me to be diligent, and after a while it came together. I couldn't say how long that was, but it had to be months. We went about my training the same way I had gone about traveling. When I was tired, I slept. When I was hungry, I ate. When I had to go, I went. Gail had an answer for the solid waste too, and it made me laugh when he explained it. The place with the burnt roof is where I take all my crap to. I figure if it's where that thing moves around the most, he is welcome to it. We went there when we had a bunch of it. Gail putting it in a hefty bag and sealing it in his backpack. He tossed it into the gaping ceiling and ran. The two of us coming back to dead zero like kids after a prank. Gail said he always waited till he had a whole bag to throw it out and he hoped the creep liked his little presents. Gail and I became good friends, but I think it was more than that for him. Sometimes when he clapped me on the shoulder, there was an almost parental gleam in his eye. We ate together. We slept near each other. We talked a lot, and we became close quickly. We talked about his travels, the things he had seen in the more than 20 years he had been moving through the Dollar Generals. But eventually we landed on a top I had been hoping he knew something about. How far in have you been? I asked one night as we were cooking marshmallows over a propane burner. Gail thought about it as he slid the mess between graham crackers and chocolate. I've marked up to 218, I think. Do you? I thought about my question a little more as I chewed over my own s'more. Do you think anyone have made it out? I said, slurring a little as the treat stuck to my mouth. I don't know, he said. If they did, I don't suppose we would know. Not unless they left notes. I nodded, taking a sip of lukewarm cocoa to clear the roof of my mouth. Surely the stores can't go on forever. There has to be an end. Gail shrugged. I suppose. It wouldn't make sense for them to go on that long. I almost hope there isn't, though. If there is an end, then there's only so much food, water, and supplies. We will eventually starve to death here, and that's a bleak prospect. We went to bed not long afterward, but I never stopped thinking about that infinite loop of perfectly odd Dollar General stores. What would be at the end? If there was one, would it be an exit? Would it be where the creature lived? Was the end what lay outside or in the ceiling? I had no answers. So I drifted off thinking about the possibilities as the fluorescent hummed overhead. Gale and I started exploring more after that, and I think he was looking for other people to add to our group. We could go see if the hermit wants to join our band, I asked, and Gale laughed bitterly as he pointed to his stomach. Maybe give him a chance to finish what he started too. I wasn't surprised to hear that the hermit had been the one to stab him, but I did wonder why he never traveled. We never saw him while we were out getting things, and we avoided his little corner like the plague. FF was strictly off limits, and I now realized I had gotten off very lucky in our exchange. I don't know how long I spent with Gale, but it felt like years. I know I say that a lot, but it's hard to convey how strange time is on that side. Time is something I'm used to counting, used to hoarding like a dragon, but here it isn't something I have to think about. What's more, I don't know if anyone is even getting these updates, and if they are, how quickly or slowly they're getting them. Are they coming in daily? Weekly? Are you reading this year's from each message? Are your children seeing them and having vague memories of something their parents told them when they were very small? Are all the Dollar Generals, beyond or otherwise, stones beneath the foundation of some other store? Does the name mean anything to those who may or may not be reading it? I don't know. I write these updates because it feels right. I write them because I feel like I should. I've gotten pretty good at traveling now. I can travel back and forth, carry supplies, hold things in my hand and travel, change my clothes and bring them back with me. And it makes me proud and a little afraid. With two of us, Gale and I have used some of the dolly loaders to move the shelves around in our hub. We've opened up the floor plans and now we have all this space for activities. I know, cheesy, but it's a classic. I've started keeping a journal of the different Dollar Generals and the beyond so that I can remember which ones are which. Here's a few store FF designation dangerous, highly, food none people one themed destroyed home of the crazy hermit. Beware this store. The shelves are bare of food. The hermit has hoarded it all somewhere safe. Could be secrets here, but they will be hard to find. Store JJ designation dangerous, moderate, food minimal people none theme waste disposal where we drop out waste. A fire took out most of the store a long time ago. The food here is all non-perishable stacked up in the back. Known location where the miasma comes out. Store T designation dangerous, low moderate, food plentiful strange people. None shadow creatures a possibility themed strange human meat market. This is the place where you may encounter shadow creatures. The shelves contain what appears to be human meat and the store smells like coppery. My research partner claims to have been accosted by these creatures, so proceed with caution. Stuff like that. I'm working on a more complete study of them. Now that I can take my notes and things with me without putting them on my phone, which will run out of space eventually. And I'm hoping to make a complete study of the DGBs. That's all for now. I'll shoot you an update when we have one. Sitting here writing this out. Listening to Gale snore. It's nice to have someone to talk to and just be with. I hope it's something that will last. Hey everyone. Hope you're still reading these or even seeing them. It's been an interesting little journey so far and I thought it might be past time for an update. Gale and I have been traversing the stores, getting supplies and mapping the different setups. And I've seen more stores in the short time I've been with Gale than I had in all the time I was on my own. I've seen places where the shelves are made of smoke. I've seen places where the ceiling and floor are reversed. And I've even seen stores I think might be on another planet. The languages vary in many of them, and some of them aren't even dialects I think are native to Earth. I've made some notes on them and I hope to write them down for you a little later. But for now I have to tell you about something that's led us to think we might not be the only ones who can travel through intent. We had gone back to KK, practicing my movements, and I was getting ready to go to another one when Gale stopped me. Something is wrong, he said, looking around. He was looking around as if expecting to see something obvious, but the answer wasn't quite that simple. The store wasn't what you would call in any kind of order, and it reminded me of the store I had trashed. Shelves were moved, things were tossed about, and the mess was everywhere. Gale could talk about not wrecking the stores, but it appeared he had done just that to his own first stop. As such, it took us a couple of minutes to notice that the sign in the window was missing. Someone had taken it down and torn it in half. Gale looked at the pieces in confusion, not sure what to make of it, but looked to the break room as if the culprit would still be in there. They weren't, but they had left their handiwork there as well. They had ripped the bulletin board down and smashed it in the floor. Gale stood looking at it like someone had desecrated a grave, and I could see him trembling in barely contained rage. "Who's done this?" he whispered, his voice full of pain. "Who has torn down my board?" He picked it up, checking over the ruined front. As I started looking for clues, there wasn't much to go off, but I did find a couple of things that the perpetrator had left behind. There was a scrap of cloth that had gotten caught in the door when whoever it was had left. There was a shoe print on the wall under the spot where the board had been, the tread visible, as if it had been made by something gross. The last tied it all together, and the smell of it made me gag a little as it hit me. Someone had taken a dump in the floor near the manager's desk and then trod through it on their way out the door. "Friggin' animal," I said, covering my nose as I took a step back. I bumped into Gale then, and he seemed to have seen it too. He took the bulletin board back with him, but the damage was definitely done. I asked him if he had any idea who could have done this, but he didn't seem to have an answer. He sat looking at the board, the cork board the only reminder of his lost friends, and I wondered if he was going to be okay. Someone, or something, had gone in and wrecked his remembrance plaque. I say something because as far as we knew, we were the only people who could travel with any accuracy. If there were others, then why hadn't we found them yet? I sat with him for a little while, hoping he would snap out of it. After a while, though, I decided to leave him to his thoughts. I'd go and find something to make to cheer him up, a nice meal or something sweet, and hopefully he'd be back to his old self. I was heading to WWW, a very special place that I discovered before meeting Gale but didn't entirely understand. When I first came to it, the floor didn't feel right, and the whole place smelled like food. When something dripped onto me as I stood studying it, I immediately went through again and stepped out onto XX. I told Gale about it after we met, and he laughed and offered to take me there. When he showed me the true nature of the place, though, I understood what a cool store I had run from. "Here, I'll show you my journal entry on it. Maybe that will shed some light on the situation. WDU store designation low to no danger people none theme dessert shop. WW is a store made entirely out of dessert items. The shelves are made of chocolate, the floors of marzipan, and the ceiling drips with endless whipped cream. Everything there is edible, all the packages, the products, even the walls and furniture are fit for consumption. It's a great place to find a sweet treat. Pretty cool, right? There really is a store for everyone." I closed my eyes and prepared to step through, wanting to grab something sweet. But as I stepped through, I thought I had made a mistake. I still stepped into the wrong Dollar General about 20% of the time. I'm far from perfect. But as the overwhelming smell of chocolate assaulted my nostrils, I realized I had gone to the right place after all. The walls, the shelves, the floor. They were all still made of confection, but their composition had changed drastically. Most of the shelves lay in chocolate shambles. The packages that were uneaten had been scattered or stomped on, and their contents were spread across the floor. The packages left smears across the ground, and the smears were worked deep into the marzipan. The ceiling was untouched, but it was a little bit out of reach. The mess was impressive, like something a wild animal might do when cornered and trying to escape. And I started looking for a source of all this destruction. It seemed familiar somehow, like a place I had seen before, and I felt the hairs prickle on my neck as I went. I found a candy cane of all things lying by the base of a shelf and held it firmly between my hands as I went deeper into the store. As I rounded an aisle, I saw something scuttle out of sight. As my foot came down in an extra thick splat of whipped cream, I heard the skitter of something that ran along on all fours. I kept checking my peripherals, listening for the subtle scrape of feet, and when something finally lunged at me, I brought the hooked end of the candy bludgeon around and cracked the end on the face of my attacker. I brandished the broken tip, ready to fight whatever had come for me. But it was the last thing I expected to find sprawled on the floor. It was him, the hermit. He was righting himself, getting up on his hands and knees and hissing at me like a wild animal. His grimy clothes were smeared with chocolate and food, and his hands were caked with the store's leavings. He seemed more feral than he had the last time I'd seen him, and when he threatened to lunge again, I shoved the broken end of the candy cane at him, and he scampered back smartly. "Get back," I yelled, And for a wonder he did. He ran for the bathroom and plunged through the door, leaving the store in disarray and leaving me with questions. I traveled to XX, following on his heels. But he was nowhere to be found. There was no way that he could travel like Gale and I could. But I suppose that would explain how he had gone to Gale's old store and messed up his board. It seemed impossible. The guy was crazy. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like it had to be him. Who else could it be? We'd encountered no one besides the hermit. And if it wasn't him, then the prospects seemed even more fearful. I went back to Deb Zero to give Gale the bad news and found him seated at the desk we'd put together and fixing his sign. I ran into the hermit. I told him when he didn't look up. What the hell were you doing in FF in the first place? He wasn't in FF, I said, hesitating a little as he looked up in confusion. I was in WWW. He's made a real mess of it. Gale sat back and I could see that he had recreated the board as it had been when I'd first seen it. The warnings, the story, the pages of remembrance to his old friends. They had all been lovingly recreated, and it did my heart good to see it restored. It deserved to be here. Anyway, IT was important to Gale and we should have protected it. It doesn't make sense, Gale said. He's never shown any inclination about leaving before. He's always stayed in FF for as long as I've known him. Are you sure about that? I asked. When I showed up, there wasn't a lot of food left, and there's no way he's been living there all this time without a source of food. Gale shrugged. I never thought about it like that. Mostly I just avoid FF because that's where I've always encountered him. I guess he must be traveling. But how does he know how to get back is what I want to know. It's not impossible, but he's about half crazy. You can't tell me that a guy like that can figure out how to travel with any real destination. I done know, I said. How long has he been here? Anyway. He was the first person I encountered when I set out traveling, and I had been traveling for quite some time when I met him. I don't know if he was here before me, but I suspect that he might have been. I guess maybe he wasn't always crazy, but that's just speculation. Any rate, if he's wrecking up the stores, then we need to stop him. Like I told you once, there's no proof that the store, or the resources they hold, are infinite. If we're going to survive here, then we need to stop him from making that harder. What's the plan then? I asked. But that's where today's story ends. Gale and I are creating a plan to stop the old guy from wrecking up the stores, but it's something we have to approach carefully. He's crazy and dangerous, and if we don't want to get hurt or killed, then we can't go in half-cocked. Gale has started keeping a close eye on our Dollar General, and we've started going into other stores with weapons. If he attacks us, we'll be ready, hopefully, and we can take him alive. As promised, though, here are a couple of excerpts from my store drawer journal. Upside down store, designation low, danger, people, none, theme, upside down. This store is like a regular store, only upside down. The shelves stay on the ceiling and the food doesn't fall off them and come up, so there must be some sort of weird gravity. Gravity doesn't seem to have reversed for us. However, us. So we walk on the ceiling and find all the shelves unreachable. Gale. However, suggested using a step ladder, and it's possible to reach high enough to pick some of the items down to us. The place makes me dizzy if I spend too much time there, and it's a real trip. S Street Store, designation moderate people, shadow drivers, theme street, fair shops is a perfectly normal street, with bay booths set up that have items. It's all still inside. But the ground is concrete, and there are garbage cans and street lamps and graffiti in odd areas. The only real danger present is that sometimes cars drive up the road part of the street. They don't go very fast and they're not hard to get out of the way of. But if they hit you, it could kill you or hurt you. The shadow people who drive them look like living shadows and they don't get out, so they aren't any trouble. As long as you stay out of the center of the street, then you should be fine. The food is normal, but aside from shelves, there are also these odd little food stalls that just seem to have cooked food in them. You shout what you want into the stalls, and if they cook it, then you can just watch it make itself. It's wild, but a nice little change up from the norm. The stalls have a finite amount of resources, but if they run out of food, then they put out a closed sign. There are 8 streets and they have sidewalks beside the shelves. The cars don't seem to come from anywhere in particular and don't seem to go anywhere either. The exit is a tunnel with a crossbow blocking it off. I've talked to Gale about going into the tunnel to see what's on the other side, but he is staunchly against it. We spent some time making plans, but very little was decided on. The hermit had to be dealt with. That much was clear, but it was the house that kept eluding us. We could take him alive, but then we'd have to guard him. We could kill him, but none of us were sure we could kill someone. He had to be stopped. But how could we do it? First thing we have to do is find him, Gale said. If he can travel, then he might be anywhere. We need to track him down and see where he is. If he's going back, then FF would be a good place to start. True, Gale said. If nothing else, we might find out more about him. What's to know? He's a crazy old dude, I said, adding a length of rope to my bag. If we were going to his lair, then there was a good chance we could set a trap for him. True, but was he always? I don't know how long this old guy's lived in the Dollar General beyonds. He could have come here when they were still called J. L. Turner and Son. Hell? Crazy dude could be Cal Turner for all I know. Who? I asked, not having a clue what he was talking about. Sorry, I don't know why I would have expected you to know the store's history. Cal Turner took over after his father died and officially named the store Dollar General after that. Word was that he went missing sometime after opening the first one. Just stepped into one of his own stores and was never seen again. His son ran them when I worked there. But I suppose he'd be an old man by now. Cal and Carl, his son, looked a lot alike, and it took the company years to admit that the owner was gone. Some people say he just became a recluse. But I knew managers who were close to the family, and they swore that the rumors were true. Anyway, I doubt the old man is Cal. He'd been older than hell and likely twice as crazy. I didn't like to think about another lost soul trapped here, but it did make me wonder how many others could be prisoners here. I have no clue how long I've been here, but I know it hasn't been very long when compared to Gale, and Gale believed the old man had been here longer than that. If people didn't age, then who was to say that Cal Turner might not be in here somewhere? Who was to say that there might not any number of people traversing the infinite? Or not so infinite? Dollar Generals, if there were. However, then why hadn't they met any of them? Have you ever met anyone else? I asked before I could think better of it. Besides you, Gale said, smiling a little as he thought about it. No one other than the hermit and Colleen. I guess. He got a little speculative then. Thinking about his friends always made him quiet and thoughtful, and I hated that. Gale was a good dude, and I didn't think he should be inundated with the guilt over people he had no control over. He had done his best, plain and simple, and they had done what people do. Hey, I asked suddenly as I slid a cold coffee drink into my backpack. If he's going through the doors, then shouldn't he stop being crazy? Gale cocked his head at me. What do you mean? Well, you said that all injuries and damage to clothes and stuff are fixed when you go through the door again. If he's rattled from his time here, then shouldn't he be kinda, I dunno, reset or something when he goes through? Gale pulled his bottom lip into his mouth, chewing it as he thought the question over. The doors had always healed anything that was wrong with us in the past. Whether it was a wound or ripped clothing, it always fixed us, and we were pretty reliant on it for clothes and general fixes. If the crazy hermit was able to travel while remaining in his wrong mind, then maybe the doors didn't reset you as much as we had thought. Hell, Rud. I don't know. Maybe he's messed up enough in the head that he thinks that's just how he is. A certain amount of what we do with the doors only happens in our heads. I don't claim to understand it all. Sometimes it works differently for different people. It works the way it works for you because that's how it works for me, and I'm the one who taught you. He may have learned differently, so it works differently for him. I guess. Maybe. We can ask him when we grab him. I nodded, trying to ignore that he had called me Rude again. Rud, or Rudy, had been his son, and the more comfortable he got with me, the more often he slipped up. I didn't mind. Not really. If he thought of me as his son, then I was okay with that. No, it was Gale who seemed to mind. Even now he had realized what he had said, and his face had gotten stormy. I knew he was still looking for Rudy, still looking for all of them, but the chances of finding them seemed to dwindle the longer they stayed gone. Rudy had gone after another of Gale's original group, but it seemed that no one came back from the ceiling. I was already trapped in Dollar General Beyond. I wasn't in a huge hurry to get trapped somewhere else. Got everything? Gale asked, pulling on his pack and taking up his club. We had never really carried weapons. Not like this. But after finding the hermit in other stores but his, we had started taking them with us. We had taken wooden chair legs and hammered nails into them. They weren't very sturdy. They were mostly spiky particle board, but they would do in a pinch. We had taken some of the hoodies off the rack and sewn cardboard into them. They weren't great, but they would do too. The cardboard wouldn't do a lot, but it was the best we could manage. Ready, I said, making the chunky sweater as comfortable as I could before we set off. I wanted to start an FF, but Gale said we should check a few key places first. I have some safe houses that I want to make sure he hasn't hit yet. It's nothing impressive, just some food and things that I've come across in my travels. I made notes as we went, and here is where we went for my journal. It's starting to come along, but I know it's a drop in the ocean in the long run. B. Normal fall store. Designation low danger people 0 theme fall decor. B is a perfectly normal Dollar General that's been set for fall. It had pumpkins and scarecrows, and some of the Halloween decorations are there, but not all. It has some seasonal items, but it seems to be the start of autumn selection and doesn't contain as much as it would by the end of October. Gale had apparently been here before and left a go bag. He went to the manager's office and opened up the red box that usually held the fire extinguisher. Instead, there was a backpack that Gale took out and unzipped. He looked over the things inside, talking under his breath as made sure it was all still there. Okay, I didn't think you would have come this far, but it was a possibility. Let's go to the next one. We did a quick check before heading out, but everything appeared to be in place. The things I had used were gone, but nothing else seemed to be taken or moved. We still weren't sure that he could take things with him. But as we moved on, we were in full data collection mode. Night store, designation moderate danger people 0 theme, a dark store with lamps. D is a shadowy place, and one of the few stores without the buzzing overhead lights. It's lit by tall metal street lamps, and the light they make doesn't go far. It does not appear to have a ceiling. Any attempt to shine a light up there reveals nothing, and Gale thinks that it's likely it's there to simulate the night sky. Some of the shelves are pushed over, and I suspect that the miasma can come and go here freely. We have never encountered him here, but it seems likely we could, and we do not linger here. Gale hit the ground running when we got to None of us like to be here, but he felt like it might be a good place to hide something because of the environment. The whole store was pitch black and lit by these interspaced lampposts that cast a yellow glow over the shelves. He reached between two shelves and took out a duffel bag, handing me the light as he went through it on the run. He didn't like coming here any more than I did, and when he had established that everything was there, he zipped it, and we headed out. There was a sound as we came to the door, something like a moaning wind from the shadowy ceiling, and we were through before we could discover what it was. Cave store, designation highly danger people 0 theme, a store inside a cave. Is a store inside a cave. As the name entails, the lighting is glowing fungus that baths everything in a mysterious glow. The shelves are carved into the stone, and some of the items are made of rock. In the middle of the store is a pool of water that is okay to drink from, but contains a monster. Gale says it's a big crocodile or something, and that it comes out to walk around on occasions. It chased us the last time we were there, and it's easily 10 feet long. There are bats that hang from the ceiling, though Gale isn't sure what they eat since there are no bugs here. He's never seen the movie either, so no one is sure what they can do. The food here is refrigerated by the cave. That is 65 at all times, and nothing seems to spoil or go bad. We came into the cave store looking for the creature who lived here. We had been here a few times. The store had a great selection of mushroom, and last time we had come face to face with the gator who lived here. I hadn't really believed Gale when he told me about it, but it was hard to deny when you were face to face with the monster. He had a long snout like a crocodile, and his scales seemed to shift through a series of colors as he came hissing after us. He was slow, thankfully, and we got out before he could catch us. But I suppose that put my rule about no living things in the dab into question. He was in his pond today. At least we assumed he was. And Gale pushed a rock aside as he took out another backpack that he checked over. Most of these bags had things like first aid kits, non-perishable foods, and tool kits that could be used to set up traps or snares. Gale had set them up just in case he needed to secure another store or travel to Infinite for a while, and I was sure that these weren't the only ones. Gale had been here long enough to set up safe houses in several stores, and the one in Jab Zero was just the first in a long line, I was sure. Okay. Gale sighed, pushing the rock back into place. He hasn't found any of these. I can't think that he has any real skill with travel. But if we haven't come up on him, then he must have enough to go back and forth. Are we ready to check FF then? I asked, still feeling that it should have been our first destination. Not yet, Gale said. Let's check a few random places. If he's just traveling willy-nilly, then we might find him somewhere near FF. I nodded, seeing the logic. And as we set off, we went to GG first. GG was the place I had stopped after my initial encounter with the oldster, and it was a store set up for Mother's Day shopping. The whole place smelled of flowers, and I really enjoyed coming here. It was nice, and the whole atmosphere seemed to glow a light pink. GG was fine, but as we moved into Heish, we could tell that someone had been there. It was a normal store, except that all the words were reversed. It was like a weird mirror store, and it looked like someone had ripped open a couple of bags of chips and ate them right off the floor. They were scattered like a rat had been at them, and though we weren't absolutely sure that it was him at first, we found more of his leavings down one of the aisles and decided that it was a good enough calling card for our little friend. We checked a few others, and some of them bore similar signs of his visits. Food scattered, trash tossed around, and a nice healthy dump left 9 times out of 10. Now are we ready to check FF? I asked, tired of looking at scat and stepping on chips. I suppose we should, Glenn said after finding his calling card in another store. It seems unlikely we'll just run up on him if he's moving so sporadically. Gale seemed like he didn't really want to go to the hermit's lair, but it was our best bet of finding him at this point. We stepped out of the cave and into the dump, the hermit's store looking as desolate as ever. The floor crackled under our feet as the wrappers and garbage crunched underfoot. He had been just dropping his trash in the same manner that he dropped his waste, and the whole store stank with a mingling of rotten food and human crap. I didn't want to be here either, but we had to go make sure he wasn't hanging out and waiting for company. We stayed close, searching every shadowy nook and dirty cranny, but we couldn't find the old man hiding anywhere. Okay, it was a good idea, but I guess he's out. Come on, let's try somewhere else. We were leaving the back area, near the automotive section, when my foot struck something and I stumbled. I immediately wished I had been looking where I was going, as I fell face first into a pile of filthy rags. My nose came into contact with the worst smells I had ever experienced. Imagine old sweat, unwashed clothes, dirty bathroom aroma, and a hobo camp on a hot day, and you're close. I came staggering up, trying to get away from it as quickly as I could. But when my hands fell on a plastic holder with what felt like paper in it, I reached back and pulled it out too. It was a backpack. One shoulder strap ripped from the bag, and inside was a journal. It was old and cracked, the leather extremely abused by the owner's hands in many openings. The paper inside was curled at the corners, and there was a bookmark inside of a happy car with a fish in its mouth. The handwriting inside was neat, a meticulous script that had been written with care, and I doubted that the crazy old man had done it. There was a lump in the middle of it, and I thought it might be a button or a name tag. But I heard Gale grunt as something came screaming from atop a nearby shelf. The old hermit had returned, and it appeared that we had found something he treasured. Gale turned to catch him, but he landed on him and knocked the wind out of him. The old man was off and capering towards me, his teeth bared and his face a mask of crazed rage. He rushed me like a linebacker, knocking me over as his long, dirty fingers closed around my neck. My air was instantly cut off, his nails digging into the back of my neck as he screamed and gibbered in his weird language. I tried to fight back. I tried to push him off, but he was solid for someone so old. Shoving at him was like shoving a boulder, and he leaned into me as I was slowly strangled. Black spots started appearing in my vision as his greasy finger choked me to the point of unconsciousness. I wondered if the door would bring me back to life when he inevitably collapsed my windpipe. Would Gale be allowed to drag me back through it? Or would this crazed loner simply bite my throat out and eat me right here, when his blood splattered my face? I supposed I'd never get to find out. As his fingers loosened, I could see Gale standing behind him, panting as he released the handle of the weapon. The nails were sticking out of the hermit's skull as he shook and gurgled, and when he slipped to the ground, his blood made dark stains on the blankets that had been his bed. Gale stepped away, shaking as badly as the old man had been, and when he ran for the door, I followed after him. When I came through and dabbed, but he didn't. I knew something was wrong. Now I'm left here with just the journal for company, feeling like maybe we've crossed a line that neither of us were ready for. I'll keep you all posted, but for now, I think I need to go and think about what's happened today. Hey everyone, I hope these are still coming through. My cell phone hasn't needed a charge in a while, and seems to be stuck on 70%. It's a shame. One more and I'd definitely have grounds for some internet points. Hi. It still displays weird times and dates, and no one has answered any of my messages or commented on any of these posts. At least on my end. Gale hasn't come back yet, but it's only been a little bit since the thing with the hermit. No, that's not right. It's only been a little bit since we were forced to kill the old man who resided in FF. I've started reading the journal, but I know now that it isn't his. The journal belongs to someone named C, and I suspect that Gale will be very interested in seeing it when he gets back. I say this because I'm pretty sure that the writer is Colleen. I'll write down a few of the entries and let you judge for yourself. But it sounds like this person has gone farther than even Gale has been. Day 1. This is the first day I've started keeping this journal. I figured out how to take it with me, and I'm experimenting to see if I can take other things with me as well. I had to find the gaudiest one I could find. I'm pretty sure it's got unicorns on it, so that I could visualize it. And that seems to be the secret. I kind of accidentally stumbled across it when I was going through one of the doors with a candy bar in my hand. I could see myself eating it, and when I stepped through, it came too. I was halfway through the Snickers before it hit me that I still had it. Everything else I had tried to take with me was left behind, and I have the feeling this might be the start of something big. Day 2, I visited 12 new Dollar Generals today. It's weird. Some of them have odd things in them. Futuristic things that I've never heard of. I found one that sold cigarettes today. Can you imagine a DG that sells tobacco? The tobacco, however, turned out to be these weird vaporizers. It still gave me nicotine, but it was definitely a head rush. I hadn't had a smoke in. God, it's been a while. It was a nice treat. Day 5, I saw a store where everything was upside down today. It made me kind of dizzy. Day 7, I managed to take a backpack with me to a new store today. All the stuff inside disappeared, for some reason. But the backpack came with me, as well as my journal, so that's a start. Day 8, I managed to take things with me to another store today. Normally it helps if you visualize all of them, but it's better if you just see the bag when you take them with you. No clue why, but it seems to work. I'll have to experiment with it some more. I had to go through 7 stores before I got it to travel with me. Some of them are pretty weird, but the one thing missing from them are people. I haven't seen a single soul since I left Gale behind, and I wake up sometimes hoping to see him standing over me. I miss him. I miss the others. I miss the sound of people talking, laughing, just existing. The stores are much too quiet for my liking. When I read that, I had to go back and read it again. Once I read the name Gale, I knew this had to be his lost friend, if she was alive, though. Then how had the old hermit gotten her journal, given the reception we had always gotten from him? It was unlikely that she had been welcomed warmly. Had he killed her? Were her bones part of the garbage that littered the store? I had to read more. Day 10, I saw weird shadows today when I went through the door. They were walking around a weird store, and there were stalls of meat just sitting around. The meat looked very questionable, and when one of the shadows grabbed me, I pulled free and made a run for it. I suspect the bins had human meat in them. Day 11 came upon a dark store lit by lamps. I didn't like it, so I didn't stay long. It made me think of the thing that took Margot and wonder if it lived there. That entry sort of sealed it for me, and I skimmed ahead a little to see if I could find some place new. Day 19 found a weird store with a burnt-out ceiling near the door. The whole place seemed weird, and I don't like anywhere with an exposed ceiling. I moved on quickly, and the next one surprised me. It was underwater. I came out swimming, and though I panicked a little, I didn't drown. I swam around, seeing a few fish. but I saw something big as I got near the back and made my way out. I expected I would have to dry out when I came through, but my clothes and my things were dry when I came out in a Christmas-themed store. Day 20 still in the Christmas store, but I've been thinking about trying to travel backwards. There has to be a way to go back, doesn't there? Gale hasn't caught up. Maybe he never left, and I don't know how long I've been traveling. Days? Weeks? Years? Who knows? It doesn't seem to matter. Time is weird here, and I can't really tell how long I've been here. My wristwatch just blinks 8888 at me, but when I go to another store, it always appears on my arm when I take it off. Maybe I'll experiment a little and see if I can go back the way I came. Day 30 after 10 days of trial and error. I finally did it. I was picturing the store I went to once, the store made of candy and sweets, and when I walked through, I was there. I was so happy that I jumped for joy. Now I just have to make it back to the original store so I can see what happened to Gale. I hope he's still alive. Day 45, no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to go back. I've been trying for days, well, for periods after sleep, and it's no good. The store was kind of unremarkable, and I can't seem to get a good picture of it in my mind. I have to keep trying. I have to keep picturing it. I know I can do it. I know I can make it. I have to go back. I have to find him. There were a lot of entries after that. The writer, Celine, either went forward through the loop or went back to similar DGBs. She was steadfast in her efforts, wanting to see Gale again, but the more she tried, the more discouraged she got. She started writing about how it might be impossible to go back to places you had started at. She began to wonder if there was an end to the stores. Slowly, she lost track of time. The days stopped mattering. The days ran together, and her contemplations began to pile up. She mused a lot, perfected her traveling, and eventually, she was rewarded. Today I did IT. I went back to the first store. I remembered this end cap we had made. Meet the team, where we had posted things about ourselves. It was just pictures and stories and little personal blurbs, but it gave me something to focus on, and I was suddenly standing in the old store. I used to hate when the flash of Margot's instant camera would catch me off guard, but when I saw that board with all our pictures and stories on it, I started crying. We had hoped that someone would find it if anything happened to us, but it looks like I had used it as a way back home. I expected to see Gale sitting there, but he wasn't. I figured he would look up and tell me I had just left and ask why I had come back so soon. Instead, he was gone. I did see his sign, however. And I went to the break room and found his memorial for us. He thinks I'm lost, just like Rudy and Kenneth and Margot. But now I'm looking for him. I have to find him. The stores can't be that numerous. There has to be an end. And if anyone has found it, I'm sure it's Gale. He'll be looking for it, or me, as we speak. And I have to find him so I can team up and help him find the end. I felt myself tear up a little as I read it. She had done it. She had come back to where it all started. If she was looking, though, how had she never found Gale? The stores were numerous, but they had to have crossed paths at some point. I began to wonder how long Gale had been gone, and I worried that he might not come back. Then I would be alone too. I looked back down, flipping through the next few pages as Colleen sat and waited to see if Gale would come back. I knew he hadn't, but it was interesting to see his travels from a different point of view. Celine eventually left too, but she left him a note on his bulletin board so that he would know she was looking for him. That struck me as weird, because Gale had never mentioned seeing signs of her. When he talked about Colleen, it was always in the past tense. He didn't expect to find her, and if he had ever found any sign of her, he had kept it to himself. What else could he have been keeping to himself? I wondered. I flipped through a few more pages before landing on something that seemed interesting. Today I have officially been to every store between the start and the Christmas store, and I haven't found Gale. I have seen sign of Gale, but I haven't found him. I have decided to press on. These stores can't go on forever, and maybe if I find the end, I'll find Gale. It's worth a shot. Today I've been to so many stores I have lost count. Time means nothing anymore. I've started carrying more food. However, when I find it, because not all the stores have actual food, I went to a store on my travels that had nothing but plastic food on the shelves. There was another with rotten food in the packages. Some of them just sell the same item duplicated 1,000 times. Some of them don't sell anything. They're just empty shelves and awful music. There is no end in sight. But I'm not giving up. Today, 30 stores today. Nothing edible today. I was attacked by bats in a large cave. I made it out, but just barely. Today I found a store where the products were made of people, and the people made of food shopped there. I'm not ashamed to say that I ate a few of them when they tried to corner me. I hadn't actually eaten in 3 or 4 stops and my supplies are all but gone. One of them was made of popcorn. His bled cola. Another was made of celery and he bled ranch dressing. After I bit and savaged a couple of them, they moved, but I was still hungry. I ate 4.5 of them before fleeing. I've got an arm made of prosciutto in my back and it's oozing Swiss cheese. Hopefully it will keep me. Today I saw some weird letters on the ground today. They told me I was in XX. I don't know what that means. But the store looked like a little Japanese village and you could get food there. It was like a theme park kind of. And there was a bathhouse where I took my first bath in a very long time. I ate and ate and ate until I thought I would burst and then soaked and slept, and when it was finally time to go again, I was rested and refreshed. Today I saw a dog today. He didn't appear to be in distress, but it was odd to see him. He followed me through the doors for a bit, whining for pets and seeming happy to see me. But eventually when I lay down to sleep, he left and went his own way. Poor thing can only move forward. What a frightening prospect. Today I've gone back to my original store. I'm not sure where I went, but if it's the end, then I don't want to go any further. I stood looking into the bathroom door, something I've done 1,000 times before. But on the other side was something different. The store I was in was a winter wonderland complete with snow, but the other side was pitch black. Things were moving in there. And the longer I looked, the more I realized they were very large but far away. I don't know what that was or what they were, but I couldn't bring myself to walk through that door. I started crying, suddenly just wanting to be home. And when I stepped through, I found myself right back where I started. It should have been demoralizing, it should have completely destroyed me, but it didn't. Probably because I know that I can go back to the door anytime I want to. Probably because I know it will be there when I am ready, and I think that's the worst part of all. I'm going to stay here for a while and consider what to do next. I hope Gale finds me, but I have long ago given up hope of finding him. That was the last entry, and I had no idea how long ago it had been. Behind that page, stuffed between the next 2 like a bookmark, was a plastic name badge with Salim on it and faded press-on letters. Gale still hasn't returned and I'm starting to get worried. For that matter, how long had I been sitting here reading it? I wanted him to see this. I want him to know that his friend is still out there. I can't imagine what's keeping him, but I have a bad feeling about it. What if he doesn't come back? What if killing that hermit pushed him over the edge somehow? What if he blames me? I don't know what to do, but as I sit here writing this, I feel my eyes getting heavy. It's been a long, well, not day, but it's been long enough. Hope I still can.